Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good Monday morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Absolute pleasure to have your company. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you very much for joining me. I'm afraid I'm going to admit, like a lot of people at our office today, a little bit bleary-eyed after staying up to watch Rory McIlroy. Excellent achievement at the Masters last night. You know, it comes to a point when you're that many hours in, you may as well push on through, right? So we're a little bleary-eyed. You hope you'll understand, but goodness me, there are no bleary-eyed stories today. Absolutely extraordinary array of stories today, and I would love to hear from you on all of the topics we're talking about today. I will hope to get as many calls as we can, but we have so many top guests in the next few hours. So many top guests. I'll bring you through everyone we're talking to. But we're going to talk about British Steel. Last-minute efforts to keep British Steel operating are carrying out today after the government was forced to take direct control of the plant at Scunthorpe amid concerns that the Chinese owners would close the plant down. Ministers with the company plan to sabotage the site to increase British reliance on cheap Chinese imports. It's led to, once again, fresh calls for the removal of Chinese companies from Britain's critical infrastructure. The fact that anyone needs to say this stuff out loud, I find extraordinary. Also going to be talking about the Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick's calling on ministers to stop appeasing Islamist terrorists held in our prisons. Says prison officials need to regain control of the extremists allowed to rule the roost behind bars. We know one of the main reasons people like Stephen Yaxley Lennon, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson, is being held in solitary confinement for many, many months on end is because of the threat from Islamist extremists. This comes after the Manchester Arena terrorist Hashim Abedi stabbed and scalded 3 prison officers in a horrific attack. Absolutely miracle that all 3 survived. But what on earth was a convicted terrorist who'd already been causing trouble in jail, already attacked people? Or why on earth was he allowed to work in the prison kitchen and able to fashion a knife out of a metal tray and get hold of scalding hot oil? On what planet would you allow that? Plus, and this is what I really want to hear from you about, a new report by the Home Affairs Select Committee. It's a bunch of MPs, the majority of whom, I know this is going to shock you, are Labour MPs. They have have concluded there was no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the riots that erupted after last year's Southport murders. And if you believe that, I have a lovely bridge over there to sell you. No evidence. In fact, they're outraged. I think it's outrageous that people made such a claim, despite the fact there is very clear evidence, some of it even on camera, on camera from the very broadcasting outlets, who, by the way, are quite happily reporting now there was no evidence. We'll talk about all of that. Also, I do want to highlight that in just an hour's time, I'm going to be joined by best-selling author Douglas Murray to talk about his brand new book. It's called On Democracies and Death Cults, Israel, Hamas and the Future of the West. You do not want to miss that. A little bit later in the show, also going to be talking about getting more calls for inquiries and prosecutions into those who turned a blind eye and aided and abetted the grooming gangs. We're going to be talking to the whistleblower Maggie Oliver about that. She, of course, someone who quit her job in Greater Manchester Police to actually campaign on this issue. An absolute hero, I think, to everyone in this country. So all that coming up. I do want to hear from you on all the topics we're talking about, but in particular about the complete abject lack of evidence, according to a committee of MPs, the Home Affairs Select Committee, that there was two-tier policing in the wake of the Southport riots. What is your reaction to that? Keep it clean, people. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. And don't forget, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. Free on X and free, of course, on our YouTube page as well. So do get in touch. No excuses. Don't worry. If you call us, we will call you back as well. Right now, delighted to say, among my brilliant and wonderful and knowledgeable guests today, commentator Sam Armstrong, who joins us in the studio throughout the show. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Right. I mean, where do we even start? Genuinely, any one of the stories I've mentioned could be the only story we talk about for 3 hours, easily. There's so much to talk about in them. But let's start with steel. Now, again, I do think a lot of people will go, oh, I don't work in a steelworks. I don't live in Scunthorpe. My job's not affected. I really don't know and I don't care. Explain to people who perhaps don't understand just how important keeping our last remaining blast furnaces making virgin steel is.
Well, you might not work in a steelworks, but you probably do ride on railways or drive a car. Or if you don't do either of those things, you rely on the Royal Navy to defend this island, and it's built up of ships which are made out of, guess what? Steel. And if you as a country cannot make steel, you fall into that lower league of nations, which is always dependent on other countries. And in a time of war, in a time of conflict, and boy, oh boy, is this a decade or an era in which we could be, if you cannot manufacture steel, you are dependent on your enemies.
And this is crucial, virgin steel, crucially, as opposed to being able to sort of adapt to other steel, other blast furnaces can do. And the crucial thing with this plant was it was sold to the Chinese a few years back. They basically making losses on it. They said they can't keep it running, but they were basically planning to just stop running it, and just basically they not only stopped orders of vital supplies to keep the blast furnaces running, they also basically sold off well, we're trying to sell off the stuff they did have. Now, crucially, the reason why MPs were recalled on Saturday, and well done MPs for working on a Saturday. I mean you are truly heroes to the world. I mean, my God, they were busy bleating on X about what wonderful people they were. OK, probably ruined a few, some holidays, but you can probably claim your flight on expenses. So, well, Easter holidays, you'll get over it. But crucial thing there was the need to get control of that build the furnaces at the weekend, because the risk of them basically going out, and once they go out, basically the chance of starting them again is so huge, might not even work because of the damage that could be done to the furnace.
Yeah, that's right. This is something that you just can't turn on and off again. But it's clear that Xingye, this Chinese company, were determined to get it shut, in part because they felt that they would get a better deal from the government if they could convert it into this new era, this new model of steel furnace, which is something called this electric arc model, which basically works by doesn't use coal and...
it's a bit cleaner, but they reckon they'd get $1 billion in investment they were hoping for if they did that. But
investment from whom?
Yeah.
Investment from whom? I'll tell you from whom. From the taxpayer.
Ta-da.
Doesn't matter which way this was going, the taxpayer was going to pick up the bill. But in the meantime, this country would have lost for 5, possibly 10 years, its capacity to manufacture steel. And if you don't think that that is a critical matter of national security, you need your head looking
I mean,
at.
again, I thought it was a critical matter of national security that we didn't have Chinese companies doing this. It's very, very, very simple. We had unions basically gathering at Scunthorpe plant to stop management arriving because they feared they were going to sabotage the plant. This was really very, very bizarre stuff. But we know that the decision not to let Chinese buy Huawei. Question about them being involved in nuclear power plants. Every single Chinese company, every company that is based in China is required to obey Chinese law. And one of the key Chinese laws is that all companies must, when asked by the Chinese government, as they are, basically put the Chinese government's needs and wants first. So they are basically tools of the Chinese. They can call themselves private if they want. They are tools acting on behalf of the Chinese government, which is a hostile state. Chinese soldiers, we know now, are actually fighting in Ukraine. In small numbers so far that we discovered. By the way, so basically, it's a proxy war almost going on. We need to understand that China is a hostile nation state. They shouldn't be allowed to own any major infrastructure in our country. But also, critically, the big elephant in the room, all the conversations about steel, is net zero. Yep. Because the main reason they couldn't make any money is because of the cost of energy. Our industrial energy costs are 4 times that of America and about double that, I think, of France and Germany. And those countries are already in industrial decline because of their energy costs. And that is not as a result of we haven't got enough clean energy, as Ed Miliband laughingly claims. It's because we have had insane net zero policies to deliberately stop us from having clean, efficient, secure, cheaper energy through fossil fuels. It is absolute madness. It was totally predictable and predicted. And yet it's all happened, and it happened under the Tory watch, it's happening under the Labour watch. I have a feeling it's going to have to get a lot worse before it gets better. But it is insane for our energy security, our economic security and our military security for us to be in this mess.
Well, and if you think the energy picture was insane, you just wait till you hear about what the other thing you need when you're making primary steel in one of these furnaces is, which is coking coal, which is this special type of coal which you mix with the iron ore and you put it all together and you burn it and out comes steel. Well, there was a planning application to build a new coking coal facility, not normal coal, coking coal, in Whitehaven in Cumbria. It was blocked. Why? Because the council, in making their planning decision, hadn't properly considered the net zero consequences, and Ed Miliband and this Labour government had put pressure on this council to cancel that. As a result, this facility in Scunthorpe, which requires coking coal to work, has to import its coking coal from Japan. Yep. The net zero zealots in this country are so extreme that they would rather you load coal onto a boat in Japan, burn diesel to ship it halfway around the world to arrive here to be loaded into a facility, yep, rather than bring it down the road 40, 50 miles.
All insane.
All because they think, but if we have another coal mine, that will send a bad signal. Even though it's not regular coal, and everybody agrees you need this resource.
Well, you say everyone agrees. I think most MPs, everyone I've questioned when you talk about net zero policies, they haven't got a clue. They know not the most basic facts on these things. They all think that we're going to be net zero by 2030. Even we're not doing it by 2050. That's even only on electricity, and we're not even going to manage that because 80% of our fuel needs are not electricity, they're gas and other fossil fuels. It is utter madness. I've been telling it for years, but people really need to start listening. We've been right about this for a very long time. And the reason we've been right is, I know this is mad, I know it won't catch on, but we base our opinions on facts. It's a mad idea, but we used to do this in this country and things went quite well. Let's talk about some more facts or questioning facts. Now, new report from the Home Affairs Select Committee, where there are 11 members, 7 of whom are Labour, 2 are Lib Dem, 2 are Tory. Certainly one of them, the chair, Tory, Karen Bradley, sort of Tory. There are Tories and there are Tories. There are Tories who could put a yellow rosette on and you wouldn't notice. You know the time. They have issued a report saying there was no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the riots after last year's Southport attack. They published a report today examining the police response to disorder that broke out after the murder of the 3 girls. And everyone always talks about the murder of the 3 girls and the attack on, a dozen other girls at Taylor Swift-themed dance class back on the 29th of July. They say that actually say these were baseless claims. They say the officers' handling of the violence was entirely appropriate given the levels of violence and criminality that were on display. They say this was not protest, this was disorder, and those participating in disorder were not policed more strongly because of their supposed political views, but because they were throwing missiles, assaulting police officers, committing arson. They say it's disgraceful to see unsubstantiated commentary about two-tier policing undermine the efforts of police officers who served bravely in the face of violence. They also are very, very clear that there wasn't enough planning and that mistakes, I think, by senior officers in terms of not realising that things were going to go violent very soon. Now, the thing about this is they're wrong because two-tier policing is evident for all to see on a daily basis. And it was evident even at that time in terms of the policing of large groups of Muslim men armed with baseball bats and knives standing on a roundabout, no police going in. A man with a knife following a Sky News camera crew around, no police going in. Now, I've got no problem with them policing with great severity people who are threatening to burn asylum seekers in asylum hotels and throwing rocks at the police. You send the police in, I've got no issue with that. But it is undoubtedly the case for quite a few of the last few years, and we saw it post-Southport, that different groups, different communities with different political views are policed in a different way. It is simple. When they say these groups weren't policed differently, yeah, because the police weren't sent into certain communities.
Look, you and I and everybody in this country all knows that there are certain types of people protesting about certain types of causes. I say protesting very lightly.
Largely peaceful BLM.
Congregating in the streets, about whom the police get very, very squeamish indeed, and all of a sudden we start hearing words like community cohesion, community relations. We spoke with community leaders. We were trying to lower the tensions. We were trying to take the fire out of it. And there are other protests in which the police are more than happy to tool up, kit up and go in for them.
Go straight in with the riot shields, yeah.
Now, I have to say, I'm actually in favour of the latter type of policing. I think if you are congregating on the streets in this country in a way that makes it intimidating for the average person to go about their business, then you need to either agree to submit yourself to certain conditions, as every single protest in this country is supposed to do, or the police need to come in and deal with it, because people should be able to go about their business without hordes of young men threatening, intimidating and acting in a way that is violent. But we saw time and time again last year a paradigm difference in the way that two categories of people were policed. And of course, it wasn't then just about policing. We then saw a very different type of justice meted out. These same judges giving very different types of sentences to different types of offenders. And if you are, for example, Lucy Connolly, a Tory councillor's wife that tweets something that was totally unacceptable, obviously deserves punishment, you get 31 months in prison. If you are a Muslim protester that has turned violent, actually done something wrong, you get a much more lenient
and there
sentence.
are these clear cases. But also bearing in mind that the Home Office itself, this is a Home Affairs Select Committee report, the Home Office itself issued it was an internal review which was exposed in January, where they basically said even making the claim that there is two-tier policing makes you far right and an extremist. I mean, it's just utterly mad. And the thing is, I do feel sorry a lot of time for the ordinary police officers, because I think they are horrified by a lot of this. And again, I'm like you're out there, you're picking up bricks, you're throwing bricks, you're making threats to the police or to people, completely innocent people, whether they're asylum seekers or not, but they're not involved in what you're doing. I want you picked up. But some of the scenes we saw where police just simply didn't go in, and again, Hare Hills, only a couple of weeks before Southport, where police just basically backed off. Well, they have a very different attitude if it's something they perceive. But you carry an England flag, they're going to go in heavy. It is really that simple. And again, to say that it's just simply untrue and it's outrageous people make those claims just does not stand up to the evidence that is before us. I want to hear from you on this in particular. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text on 87222. But a report by MPs claims there's no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the Southport riots. I want to know what your reaction is to that. Get in touch on all of the big topics. Right, we're going to take a quick break. By the way, I haven't even got round to mentioning the fact that those small boat crossings have been stopped and the gangs have been smashed by Keir Starmer. Oh, no, they haven't. The number of people who've arrived on small boats in the UK since the beginning of year is 46% up on the same period last year. It's now standing at 8,064. Well done, everybody. Those gangs really are feeling very, very smashed indeed, aren't they? Just goes to show it's more down to the weather than anything anyone in authority does, because it's just a free-for-all for getting into our country now. It's as simple as that. By the way, all linked, of course, to the Southport riots. These things are not all separate stories. Do get in touch. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking to a former prison governor about why on earth Islamist extremists seem to be ruling Britain's prisons, and how on earth did 3 prison officers barely escape with their lives after an attack by one of the Manchester Arena bombers. This is Talk.
The Navy is now on alert to escort the fuel in the steel crisis. So yesterday, Parliament recalled it was very dramatic, actually, the scene. So we saw the legislation, the speeches in the House of Commons. Then it was referred to the House of Lords. It got royal assent at 6 o'clock last night. That is really rapid. But also, there are lots of questions here about what did the government know? What did the business secretary know? How did he only just realise that actually they need to recall Parliament at a time when they'd all gone on Easter recess?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong also still with me. Let's talk about another of the biggest stories over the weekend, and the extraordinary scenes in a prison where basically saw 3 prison guards, frankly, lucky to escape with their lives after being attacked by one of the Manchester Arena bomb plotters. This is a man who is he's the brother of Hashim Abedi, of Salman Abedi, who actually carried out the Manchester Arena bombing, which of course left 22 people dead, including very young girls. Absolutely horrific attack. But his brother helped with the plot. He, of course, thankfully is behind bars, but it appears is certainly not being held in the conditions that would make him safe. Counter-terrorism police are now investigating the terrorists behind the bombing after 2 officers suffered life-threatening injuries. Another also attack, a female prison officer, thankfully All three escaped with their lives after being attacked in HMP Franklin in Durham on Saturday, but big question marks over how they were able to be attacked. This after the officers suffered severe burns and stab wounds when Abedi threw hot cooking oil over them before using makeshift knives believed to have been cut out of metal trays from the prison kitchen to stab the guards. This is what the Police Officers Association Union has said. One of the officers was stabbed in the face, we believe, and the throat, had to be airlifted for emergency surgery. A second officer is still being treated in hospital. But why on earth was a man who was already known to be a risk able to access those weapons? Well, let's talk about this with Vanessa Frake. She's a former prison governor. She's also author of The Governor, My Life Inside Britain's Most Notorious Prisons. Very, very good morning to you, Vanessa.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, you spent 16 years working in high security women's prisons. You also worked at Wormwood Scrubs as well. You know about the level of security. Now, a prisoner like Abedi, Hashem Abedi, he was serving life for 22 murders in a terror attack. He would not be kept in the normal surroundings with most other prisoners. What sort of conditions would you expect him to be kept in?
Well, Abedi was in the separation unit, which in 2017, the separation units were instigated in the high security estate. These are small units, maximum of probably about 10, for the most dangerous prisoners. And they're categories that allow you to put somebody in a separation unit is if the prisoner is a threat to national security, if their beliefs or radicalisation of other prisoners may lead to good order and security of the prison, or indeed plotting terrorist attacks either inside a jail or indeed outside. Yeah.
But we know that this man, he'd already, back in 2020, in the year that he was actually convicted, he was already convicted of another vicious attack on a prison officer. So obviously they would have been very wary of him.
Absolutely. And, you know, in the separation unit, it is a jail within a jail. And prisoners had access to kitchens to cook their own food. I'm as baffled as the rest of the population as to why he wasn't supervised, why they allowed hot oil in these kitchens. I have no idea. It's a complete and utter breakdown of our high security.
Well, that's it. I don't know why they'd be cooking their own food. That's obviously going to involve hot oil. It's going to involve knives. I mean, I know at prisons, you know, they count the number of knives that they have during every shift and things like that, but apparently he may have fashioned a knife from a metal tray. Again, count the trays as well. I mean, it does seem to us to be utterly absurd, but a lot of the concern, I know Robert Jenrick, the Shadow Justice Secretary, has raised this issue, and it's an issue that's been raised by many people over recent years, that we do have a situation where Islamist extremists are basically taking over in an awful lot of our prisons. And when we talk about that, we talk about them having an awful lot of control over other inmates, able to control the food that they eat. So, you know, it has to be halal food, not, you know, and any inmate who doesn't play along with that can find themselves severely physically attacked if they don't. But it does appear they've also got control over the prison governors as well.
Well, I don't know about that, but certainly there has been grave concerns about Islamic gangs in our jails, trying to convert other vulnerable prisoners, getting them to convert to Islam, to getting them to eat halal food, etc. And it is a worrying thing. And the issue to me is there's very little control and containment and too much appeasement within our jails. And, you know, the Prison Officers Association, the Prison Governors Association, people like me have been warning of this for probably the last 2 or 3 years. Yeah. And I think, you know, this attack at the weekend, and unfortunately it's taken this attack at the weekend to finally wake the government up to try and do something about
Well,
it.
indeed. I mean, Ian Atchison, who a big friend of the show, he's a former prison governor, as you'll know him, and he's been an advisor on counter-extremism measures, and particularly in our prisons. He's been warning about this. He was writing about this at the weekend. But this is the thing. Is there an element where, and we know that prisons are massively underfunded, we know that prison officers, a lot of the experienced officers are leaving in their droves, pay is low, conditions are bad, a lot of inexperienced officers, there's an awful lot of drugs getting into prisons now, and frankly there's just a sort of almost an attitude like in prison, a lot of prisoners left in their cells 23 hours a day, just leave people to just get on with it. As long as there's not a riot, we're winning. And as you say, it's almost just appeasement. They're not actually in control of the prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ian Atchison, through his recommendations, the separation units were born in high security estate, and he's absolutely right in what he says. It's appeasement, it's complacency, and unfortunately, like I said, it's taken this attack to highlight it. And thank God that those prison officers, although the injuries were life-threatening, I mean, at the end of the day, these prison officers had no protection. They had no stab vests. One was stabbed in the back, one in the neck. And, you go to your local supermarket, you see security guards with stab vests. Yeah. That is a reflection of our society. And a prison, at the end of the day, is a reflection of society. But
we know the stats, prison officers, the routine attacks on prison officers now. I just think most people just find it extraordinary that somebody who we knew was a danger, he plotted to kill little girls. My God, he was killed, convicted of that. And then he'd viciously attacked a prison officer a few years ago. It's not like, oh, well, it's a complete surprise. This really nice guy out of the blue, no one saw it coming. They did see it coming. The fact that there were no efforts to stop that from happening in advance, the fact that he had access to a kitchen at all, I think most people would find absolutely bewildering. Look, when we had that prison escape, was it a year or so ago? And again, we discovered, that half the staff hadn't turned up that day, and there was just lack of security. I mean, we talk on and on about we need to put more people behind bars, and then we have to release people because we haven't got enough space. We need to build more prisons, and then we're told prison doesn't work, and we're getting all of these mixed messages. And then some of the most dangerous people in the country, who, by the way, shouldn't be in the country because this was an asylum-seeking family. They should have been just sent packing, frankly, long before the terror attack at Manchester Arena happened and those little girls died. It just seems that we have just completely lost control of our entire justice system.
I don't disagree with you, Julia.
Which is worrying as a former prison governor.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I feel for the staff that have to go in. Everybody who goes to work should have the right to be safe and go home to their families at night. Yeah. And this is worrying, not just for the high security estate, but for right the way through the prison justice system. Yeah. And I think, without failure, our prison system is broken. I can't stress that enough. We lock up some very, very dangerous individuals now, not just Abidi, there are equal to him. Yeah. And, if something, I'm sick to death of various government ministers saying their shock and their horror. Yeah. We'll do something about it.
And they shouldn't be shocked by it. Vanessa Frey, always good to talk to you. You know what you're talking about. Certainly a Thames like more than many of the ministers. Former prison governor, author of The Governor, My Life Inside Britain's Most Notorious Prisons. Thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, brief word from you on this.
Well, you know what winds me up about this the most is that this wasn't a secret. This wasn't a surprise. The Inspectorate of Prisons had been into that facility, HMP Franklin. This is the hole where we send the worst of the worst. Yeah. And it had gone into this place, which is this place for the likes of Abedi, people who are too dangerous, so dangerous that they cannot be allowed to be around the likes of Wayne Couzens or Levi Belfield or Ian Huntley because of the risks they pose to them, right? And they had been into this facility and they'd written a report. And the report praised them for giving the prisoners the right to cook their food. And it criticised them. It criticised them for conducting searches on those prisoners when they went to and from their kitchen. Those were official government inspectors conducting official government policy and putting across the views of the British state. Each and every one of those inspectors should be kicked out of the door today, gone. We need to completely reassess the way that we are dealing with this.
But it's the whole
prison
bleeding heart attitude of everybody involved in the whole justice system.
Why the hell do I care how this man gets his food, whether or not he gets the food he wants? This man should be dumped in a cage. He should be forgotten about. Yes, I accept we have to feed him, but as far as I'm concerned, he can have the slops from the kitchen delivered to his cell every day.
Like everyone else.
He shouldn't be leaving it. I don't care. Frankly, it's amazing to me how he hasn't got a whole life sentence in the first place. He certainly, in my view, deserves one now. But he's in there for a minimum of 55 years. I don't care how he's being fed. I do care that prison officers should be able to go about their work without taking the risk of getting stabbed. I think the entire justice system, from top to bottom, needs completely going over. And we need to get back to doing what prison is about, which is punishing this man for the murder of 22 innocent people who had done nothing but go to a music concert. And I don't know how anybody that doesn't understand that should have any role anywhere at any level in the punishment and detection of crime in this country.
Amen to every single word. 10:35 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, we'll talk to Shadow Housing and Community Secretary Kevin Hollinrake. Talk to you about steel and you name it, everything else in the news. If you want to have your say, you've got to get in touch. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Do not forget, in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be talking to the brilliant, the wonderful Douglas Murray about his brand new book on democracies and death cults. You do not want to miss that. Stay tuned. Douglas Murray here in about 20 minutes' time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and let's introduce our next guest now, Shadow Housing and Community Secretary, Conservative MP Kevin Hollinrake. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. There is so much I want to get through. Let's get straight to it. Let's talk British Steel first of all. How concerned are you that anyone thought it was a good idea to sell a key part of our national energy infrastructure to a Chinese company, and how we got into the mess that MPs had to be recalled during their Easter recess to carry out a vote? And how concerned are you that we still have the possibility of, Chinese involvement in our major infrastructure projects?
Well, everything's easy with the benefit of hindsight, Julia.
Is it? Did we need hindsight not to sell off our infrastructure to the Chinese, a hostile nation state?
Sorry to intrude your questions while I'm trying to answer them. The reality is, as you know, British Steel effectively went bust, or Greybull Capital went bust 4 or 5 years ago. It went into administration. The government continued, under a Conservative government, continued to pay the wages of the workers there to make sure it stayed in business. We like everybody else, would prefer to see a private sector operator because, as you know, government's not very good at running things generally, so we'd rather a private sector involved. To be honest, Jingye, I think I wasn't involved intimately with the deal at the time, but I think it was the only game in town, realistically. And You look back now, of course, that was a mistake, and we know a lot more about China today than we did in 2021. And the reality is, I think we've reshaped our relationship with China since then, quite rightly.
We knew plenty about China. We knew about slave labour camps. We knew about.
Did you say anything about it back then, Julia? Did you say anything about that deal back then?
That deal, I don't think we discussed that particular deal back then. But yes, I was absolutely on air well before 2020, talking about how we shouldn't be selling off our infrastructure to Chinese as a hostile nation state. Yeah, I'm afraid I was. So it didn't need hindsight.
Well,
let's also talk about hindsight when it comes to the reason why the company, whether it's owned by the British taxpayer or whether it's owned by Jingye or indeed any other company, cannot possibly make a profit. And you know as well as I do, the big, very large elephant in the room is net zero policies pursued by this government, pursued by a government you were business minister in under Rishi Sunak in the past. And that is a net zero policy, which means that our energy prices for industrial use are 4 times higher than the United States, double that of France and Germany. No company which is an energy intense as making steel is going to be able to make a profit when our energy prices are deliberately kept sky high.
No, that's right. Can I just back on the Chinese point? I was also a member of the Chinese research group back there as a backbencher. I was very concerned about the Chinese influence. I wasn't business secretary. Nevertheless, but yes, you're right, of course. And I think, again, there's a combination of things have happened. No, I don't think anybody seriously thinks moving to renewables is a bad thing as long as they're competitive. So whether it is nuclear, whether it is offshore wind, whether it is solar in some contexts, I think the right thing as part of a mix. I think what's happened is what wasn't sufficiently understood, particularly in the context of Russia, is that would drive energy prices sky high, particularly for industries. We know that now. And with the benefit of hindsight, we should have known that then, and you can say we should have forecast what was going to happen, but we didn't know what was going to happen. We know what's going to happen now, and that's why we do need to continue the energy mix in terms of oil and gas exploration as well as renewables. That's where we need to be, and particularly for industries, we need to make sure those industries are competitive. What you see in Germany, you're going to tell me Germany is about 50% lower in terms of industrial energy prices than the UK. That is true. But what they do is consumers pay more for electricity than businesses.
Yeah.
So
no, Germany's in a massive.
You should be honest. You should be honest. We should all be honest about the trade-off here. That if you want to lower industrial energy prices, that will mean somebody else pays more.
No, that's not the trade-off.
Yes.
The trade-off is, do you want to have an energy policy that absolutely insanely tries to push us towards being net zero way before any of the technologies available that would make that viable and for us to continue as a 21st century industrialised
That's a simplistic view of the situation.
No, it's the one based on facts.
It's a simplistic view of the situation.
It's the one based on facts. We need to use fossil fuels.
If you want to talk about the facts, the reason fossil fuel exploration slowed down in the North Sea, and in fact has now stopped under Ed Miliband,
too expensive.
was not because we banned exploration.
I know.
It's because the banks, in their wisdom, they moved to this ESG regime, which wasn't government mandated, which meant they didn't want to fund energy exploration in the North Sea. That's what happened. We can have a sensible conversation, Julia, about what's actually happened here, or you can just jump to populist positions that are not achievable in the short term.
I don't think populist, fact-based positions. It is a simple matter of fact that energy prices in our country are sky high because of net zero policies pursued by this government and previous governments.
That's simplistic.
We would have been able to cope with the Ukraine. We're not fracking because of that, because of government policies.
I supported fracking, Julia.
I'm not.
Even though 85% of my constituency is covered in fracking licences, I supported that. I'm not against that.
I'm not having a go at you personally, but you did work in the last Conservative government.
No, well, I was trying to explain to you before, and you're a very intelligent woman. That's not patronising, but you are. But you know, if you're honest with your audience now, you know the prices of energy in the UK are not high purely. Industrial energy prices are not high purely because of net zero. They're high because lots of factors, international gas prices, but also the fact there's a trade-off here between how much consumers pay and how much businesses pay. That's
consumers also pay some of the highest energy prices in the Western world. So it's not. Don't tell my audience or me that our energy prices are not sky high as well. And I mean, honest, I don't want to get. We've got lots more I want to talk about. If politicians, on the front bench politicians on either side of the divide, don't recognise that net zero is is the fundamental issue behind here, then we frankly we don't stand a chance.
It's not the. But I don't disagree with that. But let's not be simplistic. It's not the only reason.
I didn't say it was the only reason. It's the elephant in the room that's not being addressed.
Well, at least we're on the same page.
All right, then. Let's talk.
As you know, the leader of the opposition has come out and said we will not achieve net zero by 2050. It will mean we have a more sensible energy mix. It does lower prices.
Yeah, I wish she'd been saying that when she was in government. That would have been good too. Let's talk Southport. The Home Affairs Select Committee has issued a report saying there was no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the riots after Southport. They also criticised the police. They praised individual police officers for a fantastic bravery and heroism during those riots, and absolutely quite rightly. But they also criticised some of the decision-making in terms of not preparing the police for when protests were turning violent. Do you believe there's evidence of two-tier policing?
Yes, I do. Listen, I have no time for anybody who goes on the streets and throws rocks and missiles at the police. Those people should be arrested. They should be put in jail. That's the reality. But I have grave concerns where you have a situation whereby those people are literally put into accelerated justice procedures and get into jail for long sentences within a very short period of time. At the same time, you have things like well-recorded incidents, such as the incident at Manchester Airport, where it took the police months to charge those people who there's clear evidence of wrongdoing on their behalf. So that's
clear evidence of a very, very serious crime taking place. But of course, we had Hare Hills riots on the street. Police withdrew. We also have scenes all caught on camera by national broadcasters of large groups of Muslim people from the Muslim community nearby, armed up, tooled baseball bats, standing there. Of course, there isn't two-tier policing if the police don't go into certain, as they say, certain communities because of community cohesion concerns. They claim there isn't two-tier policing because they've never even gone in. Whereas other communities did see that policing, and a lot of people involved in those people who were protesting quite legitimately and reasonably in the aftermath, peacefully, not breaking the law as they're legally allowed to do. They were kind of thrown in with others accused of being far right and ended up being caught in very violent scenes. I mean, so what do you make of the Home Affairs Select Committee? I mean, it's chaired by a Tory MP, 7 Labour out of 11. Yeah. Do you think they've just had their eyes closed? Are they wrong? Are they lying? Why do you think they've come up with this report?
Well, this report only came out, I think, overnight. I only saw the press reports on it this morning. Julie, you might have read the whole thing. I haven't read the whole thing, and I don't know the context and the extent of of the inquiry. But there are, to my mind, there's certainly evidence that some cohorts of people get treated differently to others, and I'm not happy with that at all.
Okay.
Justice should be blind. That's a basic principle of it. There should be no no-go areas in this country. The police should go anywhere, and the law must be applied equally. I don't care what community you're from. I don't care what religion you follow. I don't care any of that. What I care about is that every single crime in this country, whoever perpetrates it, is treated equally with equal force with the law.
Indeed. Let's also talk about Channel migrants' latest figures on small boat crossings in 2025. Those gangs have been well and truly smashed by Keir Starmer since he's come into office. In the first few months of this year, we are now seeing a total of 8,064 people crossing, maybe more since those figures came out to the weekend. It's up 46% in the same months last year. What do you make of that?
Well, who knew? I mean, who knew that smashing in gangs wouldn't work? It's just complete nonsense. It's a con. I mean, we've been trying to smash the drug gangs now for 50 years, I guess. And it is you play whack-a-mole. To think you can solve this problem simply by smashing the gangs. And you look what the Labour Party has done since it took over office. It's made illegal migrants legal. People coming over the channel now are legal in this country, which is clearly is weakening the deterrent, and they scrapped the major deterrent, which is Rwanda. And there's no doubt in my mind, if you said to people, you come here illegally, you can never settle in the UK. If your asylum case checks out, then you'll be able to settle in Rwanda. People will not be coming to the UK, or they're coming in far fewer numbers. Well, that policy would have worked.
Only if it was on the grand scale that Australia did. I think sending a couple of hundred people would be willing to take their risk.
That was never the plan, Julia. Don't fall for that Labour nonsense. That was never the plan.
Look at the actual stats. You only planned to send a couple of hundred people.
This was a scalable
You were going to send a
solution.
couple of hundred people. I'm in favour. Oh, I was in favour of the Rwanda plan, philosophically, legally, but it wasn't the numbers.
The detail, Julia. You can do that. You read behind the detail. That could be scaled up to thousands and thousands of people.
It had to be everybody.
Of
For it
course,
to
and that's the
work,
plan.
what worked in Australia was everybody, but that wasn't. Yeah, but that wasn't the initial plan. All right, let's finally. Time is against us. Let's talk about Birmingham. They've gone 4 or 5 weeks now without any bin collections in most of the city. Now we're told that the army is going in, but only in a working from home on a Zoom role, offering logistical help. How much logistical help does anyone need to go? There's a big pile of rotting bin bags that's been there for a month. Why don't you put it in a refuse lorry and take it away? That seems to me. Why would you need logistical? Isn't it time that the army is quite literally sent in to clear the streets, and we have our second city back in a clean and healthy state for its people?
Well, it's ludicrous. I mean, to bring the army in whatever context, as you say, these are supposedly admin roles for now. But one thing that Birmingham City Council is not short of, I'm sure, are admin people to do with this. So what they're short of is bin workers to go out there and collect the stuff, because United brought them out and strike. And this is, let's scotch any kind of suggestion that this is somehow because the council's been underfunded. This is a Labour council completely messed up a negotiation with Unite back in 2017 on a pay deal and paid them off. Unite, they incredibly take Birmingham City Council to court over the deal they agreed on, that it was not fair to women, and won 760 million quid of money that Birmingham taxpayers have got to pay, and then incredibly won't let Birmingham City Council deal with it by restructuring the workforce. It's classic socialism. It just is one side of the equation. It's all a fault of the Labour City Council, and Unite and Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner will do nothing about it. I mean, look, they brought us into Parliament on Saturday. Brought us into Parliament, changed the law in a day for Scunthorpe, and we agreed that was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. But will they do anything similar on this to sort this out? Will they?
Well,
Because
I mean, God forbid the MPs could work another Saturday. Can I just ask you, just finally, while you were talking, news just come in from Westminster Magistrate Court. Steve Bray, known as, Stop Brexit Man. You'll know him well. You'll have heard him many a time in Westminster. He's just been cleared at the court of flouting a police ban on playing anti-Tory, anti-Brexit music through speakers outside Parliament in March last year. Do you welcome or sort of hang your head in horror at that news?
I hang my head in horror. I have no problem anybody protesting, Steve or anybody else. But if you're a tourist coming to central London, you're going to see the most iconic building, one of the most iconic buildings in the world, and you stand there and they've got these huge speakers at the end of Whitehall there, and it is obtrusive, it is unsettling, and it just is an embarrassment. And we brought in laws to stop this kind of stuff. If the courts won't enforce it, we need to go back to the courts again and make sure they do.
Kevin Hollerake, we covered a lot of ground there. Shadow Housing and Community Secretary, thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to take a quick break. 10:51 is time. I want to get to your calls. 0344 499 1000 and more from Sam Armstrong as well. This is Talk.
This is Hashem Abedi in HMP Frankland in Durham. So he attacked 3 prison officers with weapons and cooking oil in a high-security jail. He's serving life for 22 murders in that Manchester Arena bombing. Just absolutely shocking. So the officers suffered burns and stab wounds. He threw hot cooking oil over them and then used homemade weapons to stab the guards. You and I talked about this earlier, but just in terms of that, there are lots of questions. How on earth is this man allowed cooking oil? How is he in a kitchen? How does he have homemade weapons? Why isn't he in solitary isolation?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:55 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls coming in thick and fast. Don't forget, in about 5 minutes' time, Douglas Murray is going to be here live in the studio talking about his brand new book. You do not want to miss that. Let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000. Get Sam Armstrong's thoughts as well. But Jamal is in Leeds. Jamal, you wanted to talk about two-tier policing, which apparently does not exist according to MPs on the Home Affairs Select Committee.
Well, good morning, Julia. Good morning. And yes, like you, I do believe that two-tier policing does exist. Yep. And I think that there is a phrase that I came across recently which beautifully describes everything that's happening at the moment. It's called anarcho-tyranny. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. The definition of it is a system of government that fails to enforce or adjudicate protection to its citizens while simultaneously persecuting innocent conduct. And that's what we see. We see innocent people who make a flippant remark on social media, doing time in prison, whilst violent offenders, all those people in the Manchester airport, who broke the officer's nose, and they still haven't been dealt with. Yeah, I mean, well, okay, that issue is now sub judice, but again, it was the Reform Party threatening to bring a private prosecution months later that actually led to those prosecutions. But that is what people are innocent until proven guilty, whatever evidence we may have seen on video. But the reality is, of course, I mean, people being arrested and charged and pleading in court within sort of 48 hours after Southport, but it took months for there even to be a charge brought in that case. Well, yeah, what we have is a Kafka-esque environment now where the legislation, particularly hate crime legislation, is so vaguely worded that anything can be construed as a crime. I mean, I've watched the full video of the Rotherham riot, protest, whatever you want to call it. One of these auditors have uploaded it on YouTube, and I can't see any evidence of criminality on the part of Peter Lynch. All I can see is he's holding up a placard, and they all say that general conspiracy theories, but that's I don't know enough about that. I don't want to get into legals. I'm going to have to be careful on that. I do apologise, my own ignorance there. But what do you make of the MPs doing this report, basically saying sort of how outrageous it is that anyone should claim there's two-tier policing? Yes, well, I would encourage anyone at home to watch the video that one of these auditors have uploaded, the full video of people at the Rotherham riot, and you can see at the beginning of it, clearly you can see Peter Lynch just stood there. All right, OK. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you for that. Let's go to Dave. He's on the line in Basildon. Dave, you want to mention, come back on something that our last guest, Kevin Hollingreich, had to say. He's now a shadow minister, was a government minister in the last Tory government. What do you want to say?
Yes, why didn't he resign from government if he was that concerned and dissatisfied with the relationship we were having with China? Yeah, because this is about China being allowed to buy these steelworks, yeah. Yeah, they all wanted to get rid of Boris, so they resigned. None of them have got any principles, any morals, and they never got rid of the immigrants. It's all right for him to say, get tough now on the talk about sending people back, and if you come in illegally, you will never be allowed to settle in Britain. Yeah, but nothing
There was barely any action before we got to about a year away from the election, and then suddenly they woke up to it. This is true, the point we keep making. I'm always saying, you know, these problems didn't start in July last year, did they? Dave, so appreciate your call. Do call in again. Thank you so much. Just a final quick word to Sam Armstrong. Well, whatever you want to come back on very briefly.
Well, look, I think it's a fair point, and the Tories are in a difficult position on all of this, which is people are rightly turning around and saying, well, hang on, you seem to be saying all of these things are a problem now. But
where were you?
In office, you had 14 years. What did you do?
Absolutely. Well, a point you and I have made discussed on many a Monday morning, have we not? Coming up in just a few moments, I'm delighted to say we're going to be welcoming Douglas Murray, the brilliant best-selling author, to the studio. Talk about his brand new book. You do not want to miss that. There is so much to talk about, so many big stories. I can't wait to get more of your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch with. We are, of course, Talk. We are the home of common sense.
How much, ladies and gentlemen, are fish and chips where you come from? We'll go to Jason in Crewe.
Jason from Crewe, fish, chips and peas, £7.50. It's the best chippy in England.
Janice in Leeds, go.
Regarding fish and chips in Leeds, it's between £9.50 and £12.75.
Whitby, how much is fish and chips?
3 of us, fish, chips, peas, I think one of us curry sauce, 3 cans of pop, just short of 70 quid.
£70? That's 23 quid a head, man. Even my maths does that. Very quickly, a voice note. Campbell in Scotland, go.
Up here in Banff in the northeast of Scotland, we can get a fillet and a half of haddock with a regular chips for £8 and 10 pence, and it's by far and away one of the best chippies I've ever had.
Kenneth in Surrey, fish and chips, go.
Fish and chips in Ascot, about half a mile from where you used to live, will cost you £12 and 60 pence. Great show. Keep up the good work.
That's why I moved, because you were living there. When was the last time you had fish and chips?
A couple of weeks ago.
How much? Where'd you get it from?
I think it was about 40 quid. It was in the Ivy.
Honestly, you really are. These are people. I nearly said you're a...
Give me a ring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is an absolute pleasure to have your company. Lots going on in the show. Just a couple of moments, I'll be joined by best-selling author Douglas Murray. Also, we're going to be talking more about that report by the Home Affairs Select Committee, which apparently couldn't find any evidence of two-tier policing after the Southport riots. Not sure they looked very hard in that case. And also in a Talk exclusive, Greater Manchester Police have come under fire for a tick box diversity drive that encouraged people with no GCSEs and often little or no English language to apply to the force. But don't worry, you ticked a box, so that's OK. Plus, the US President Donald Trump, he may have been in the news quite a lot lately. He's warned that nobody's getting off the hook for unfair trade balances, suggesting that further tariffs could be expected. This after that exemption for gadgets such as mobile phones and laptops came into force at the weekend from those 125% China tariffs. There is so much more I want to talk to you about. Lots and lots of calls coming in. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000 if you want to have your say on any of the big topics we're talking about. And you may indeed want to put in a call about what my next guest West has to say. I am so delighted and thrilled to welcome Douglas Murray to the studio. He's a best-selling author. Every single book he's written has been an absolutely heroic piece. But his latest book is On Democracies and Death Cults, Israel, Hamas and the Future of the West. A very, very good morning to you.
So good to be back in the studio with you.
Always good to have you join us. Well, also, I must point out, Sam Armstrong is still here listening to all that. I don't want to leave you out of this. And I'm sure you'll have plenty to say on what Douglas has to say as well. Your latest book, thrilled to get a hold of an early copy. It's one of the benefits of my job. All of your books, it seems to me, they have a specific topic, whether it's immigration to Europe, whether it's about woke culture, Black Lives Matter, or in this issue, this is about Israel, Hamas and the future of the West. But they all seem to have a theme, which is about sort of the existential threats that the West faces. So how does this book fit into that theme?
That's right. Well, it starts with the morning of October the 7th, 2023, when 1,200 terrorists invaded Israel. 4,000 terrorists invaded Israel, killed 1,200 people. Just think about that. I mean, 4,000 terrorists is an army. They slaughtered 1,200 Israelis in their homes and at the dance festival, at the Nova Party. They rampaged through the country, raping, burning people in their homes. They took 250 Israelis hostage. And if you do that by proportion of the British population, that's many thousands, something like 20,000 British people being killed in a day and thousands being kidnapped. It was an unbelievable atrocity, and I went to Israel as soon as I could afterwards, just because, among other things, I knew that the history of this conflict means that whenever something happens against Israel and Israel replies, the world focuses on the reply rather than the initial
As
thing.
they did within hours.
And I could see that,
before there was even a response.
And I could see that happening, so I wanted to go and speak to people firsthand, the victims, the wounded, the families of the hostages, and many more. And I spent most of the year afterwards with them, as well as in Gaza and Lebanon. The second thing was that I became very aware at an early stage that there was going to be a huge backlash, because indeed the backlash started on the evening. We know now that the people who were in support of Hamas in Britain put in their requests to protest against Israel that evening for the next day.
While the massacres were still
going on. They were actually protesting in London on the evening in support of the massacre. So the first question is what happened on the day, and I chronicle that as well as Israel's military response. But the real question of the book for British readers is, what does it tell us about our societies that when atrocities of this scale, I mean, imagine like the appalling Manchester Arena attack times hundreds, that when that happens, so many people in our society are not on the side of the victims, but are on the side of the death cult, are chanting support for Hamas and Hezbollah on Britain's streets. Why within days were hundreds of thousands of our fellow Brits supporting the people who were the rapists, the jihadists, the beheaders? I say, among other things, we lived through this 10 years of believe all women, but as a recent report showed, only about a quarter of British Muslims who are young believe there were any rapes or murders on the day. What has happened that at places like Oxford University, which are meant to be producing the next generation of intelligent people, I suppose,
we hope
we see people supporting not a liberal democratic state like ours, but the jihadists. This is a serious question for this country, and this country has seriously failed to address it.
Well, I was when I started reading your book, and the first line of the first page in the introduction was something you'd said to me on air when you were in Israel after the attacks. Sometimes a flare goes up and you get to see exactly where everyone is standing. And those words have haunted me ever since. They give me goosebumps even now reading that out, because I was so horrified, like you, but perhaps we shouldn't have been horrified or shocked in any way by the reaction of so many people in the West, but particularly on the left. Now, we fought sort of the anti-Semitic views on the right in this country and fought anti-Semitism, in Europe. The growth of it on the left, I think, was a surprise to a lot of people who hadn't been been paying attention for a long time. Jeremy Corbyn almost becoming, by a really close chance.
Really close.
In 2017, he could have become the Prime Minister of this country, and the anti-Semitic forces which he sort of, helped encourage. Why do you think there has been this growth in anti-Semitism in this country, which we are seeing largely on the left, and they cloak it as anti-Israel. Sure. We know what it is. Yeah. Why do you think that has come from?
Several things. By the way, the reason why it's cloaked in anti-Israelism is that it is anti-Semitism. Not all of it, by any means. You can criticise the Israeli government. My goodness, the Israeli media criticises the Israeli government. There's nothing anti-Semitic just in criticising a government. There is something profoundly anti-Semitic if you never came out on the streets of Britain week after week to protest against the killing of hundreds of thousands of people for a decade in Syria, hundreds of thousands of people for years in Yemen, an ongoing genocide in the Sudan. If you didn't...
Uyghur people in China, not that bothered.
Nothing. And yet, week in, week out, day after day, our city centres get shut down by the anti-Israel mob. By the way, the thing about anti-Semitism, as I say in the book, is that it's a shape-shifting virus. It can come from right, it can come from left, it can come from people who accuse the Jews of being religious and people who accuse the Jews of being too secular. It used to be the case that anti-Semites attacked Jews for being stateless, rootless cosmopolitans, and now Jews get attacked for having a state. So that's very clear to me. What's interesting about the question you ask about right and left on that is we know what right-wing anti-Semitism looks like broadly. There are people who describe themselves as anti-Nazi in the sort of far-left movements. And you go, yeah, well done, guys. Clever in the 1930s, brave in the 1940s, 2020s? But here's the thing. If you see a bunch of guys in jackboots and wearing, swastikas, then you go, oh, I think these guys might be anti-Semites. But when they come in the anti-Semitic kit of the left, a lot of people don't seem to realise it. Look at the people who've been going around our streets in the last 18 months. Yep. They wear the new left-wing terrorist chic. They wear kafirs and they think that they're being so brave. Usually, by the way, as Julia, you'll have noticed, they simultaneously support jihad and have a deep fear of the COVID-19 virus. Because the left-wing anti-Semites, they're simultaneously very pro-terror and pretend to be very anti-COVID, very fearful. What they're doing is they're covering their faces because they're cowards. They're bigots and they're cowards. But people have been much slower to wake up to that.
But you talk about effectively how anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine for civilizational sort of, rot, basically. And you've talked about, and I mentioned your previous books, the Strange Death of Europe and others. They've all been massive bestsellers internationally, and I think have been game changers politically. But talking about the damage that mass immigration has done to Western civilization in terms of Western values, in terms of, and we can see that play out, as you say, on our streets every other Saturday. And the culture wars, critical race theory, trans ideology, all of these things, actually how they undermine our civilization from underneath. And people think these are separate things. They think these things are, they're minor issues. They're side issues. Explain why they're all somehow related and why they are significant.
Two things I would say. First of all, there's a very easy early warning sign. You'll notice that at all of the anti-Israel protests that have happened in this country in the last 18 months, you'll see a lot of Palestinian flags. You'll see some Hamas flags. You'll see some Hezbollah flags. One thing you'll never see is a British flag. They never sing God Save the King at the end of their march, do they? There'll be people calling for jihad, 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 intifada, intifada, intifada. Never God Save the King. By contrast, the few pro-Israel protests that have happened in this country will finish with the singing of Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, and the singing of God Save the King. Yep. You will see Israeli flags and British flags melded in together. It's the same everywhere. Canada, it's the same rule. You'll never see a Canadian flag at the anti-Israel protests. You'll always see them at the pro-Israel protests. There's a reason for this, which is, as I say in the book, for the anti-Western ideologues, and that's what it is. Yep. It's anti-Westernism. They hate Israel first, but they hate all the rest of us next. The group at Columbia University that spent the last 18 years in New York trying to shut down studies, chasing Jewish students across campus, threatening them with violence from Hamas, the foundational statement of the group that's done that is that they want the, quote, complete destruction of Western civilization. The complete destruction of Western civilization. So anyway...
They said the quiet bit out loud.
Yeah, I mean, in their case, they're saying the loud bit out loud increasingly. They're very, very clear about what they hate. And it's Israel first, but Britain and America and the rest of the West.
And they hate Israel. And again, it is bizarre. There are so many states in the Middle East, in particular, where people are oppressed on a grand scale, as you pointed out, and suffering in wars. And indeed, Muslims being oppressed by, interestingly, other Muslims, whether it's different sects or just democratic, non-democratic leaders, dictatorial leaders. And yet, Israel is always the nation that's held up as the problem in the Middle East. It's this tiny... Don't they have like less than 1% of the territory of the Middle East? But apparently, Israel is the problem, but it's the only state where Arabs and Jews can live freely and openly.
Yes, I mean, I hit down all of the sort of idiot and anti-Semitic, anti-Israel arguments in this book, one by one. Apartheid, and genocide and all this sort of stuff. All of it is fallacious, all of it's untrue, all of it's a libel. But it comes on to the second thing I wanted to say about that, which is, what is it that about Israel gets under their skin so much? One thing is, of course, is that among Muslims in the UK, as a great enemy of mine, Mehdi Hassan, once said in 2013, in a moment of rare truthfulness, he said in a column in the New Statesman that anti-Semitism is, quote, our dirty little secret in the Muslim community in Britain. He said, every Muslim reading this will know what I'm talking about. It is, quote, rife and commonplace. Now, I believe him. I believe him on that. Yeah. There is a vast reservoir of anti-Semitism within the Muslim community here, and that's what's driven a lot of this. But in the Middle East, what irritates so many Muslims is that here is this tiny, tiny state, and founded in 1948, it's done incredibly well. It's thriving, it's multiracial, multi-religious. It has, as people have observed since the 50s, made the desert bloom. Standard of living is higher than its neighbours by a long way, and the neighbours notice this, and instead of thinking, how can we be more like them, think, this is an affront, this is an affront to us. Now, I say that that's a problem for the Muslim world, and they can either deal with it or not, and I hope they deal with it. But for the non-Muslim world and for the world in the West, I think that Israel also produces a challenge, and the challenge essentially is this. The younger generation in Israel were tested on October the 7th. Yep. I tell stories not just of the unbelievable suffering, but of the incredible heroism. For the last 18 months, I've been with the IDF as I've seen young men and women putting their lives on the line, risking their lives, often losing them, to get back the hostages and to kill the leadership of Hamas. A lot of people don't realise,
every young citizen in Israel, if you want to have an Israeli passport, you have to serve.
Yes. And by the way, it's a tremendous bonding thing for the country. It really knits the country together. I've been with Druze soldiers, Arab soldiers, Jewish soldiers. But for me, one of the reasons why this book is actually sort of optimistic in the end is that I believe that the people of Israel in the last 18 months have faced an unbelievable trial, and that they have come out of it showing us a good example. And what I mean by that is the young men and women of Israel, in the IDF in particular, have shown that when your country is at threat, when your people's future is at threat, you fight. Now, this country, we have these polls that have come out in the last year and a half asking young Brits whether, between the ages of 18 and 40, if we faced an existential threat in this country like our forebears did, would they step forward and fight? And a minority of young British people said they would. Now, I think that's because our young people in Britain have been demoralised and demotivated. They've been told that we don't have any heroes. They've been told that Churchill's the bad guy of the 20th century. They've been told we're slavers and colonialists and much, much more. We've been lied to about our own past, and we've been lied to deliberately. And the aim is to demotivate British society, just as the aim has been to demotivate American society. But here's the good news. We can remotivate ourselves as well. We don't have to be in this horrible state of despondency and inadequacy and failure. When the moment of trial comes, as it did for Israel, the young Israelis raised themselves to the moment. And I would suggest that among young British people and so on, they have choices in front of them. One is the choice to become the biggest victim you can. to wallow in despondency
I
and
can't
self-pity.
serve, I've got ADHD.
I'm as somebody said on the response to one of those surveys, 9% of people who said that they wouldn't serve in Britain if our country was under immediate existential threat said they couldn't because there was someone at home they were looking after.
They were a carer.
I mean, I kind of think that if Granny's going to be raped and murdered, it's better that you fight to stop that rather than make sure she's going to get her hobnob in the evening. I mean, this is preposterous thinking, and we've been encouraging it. We've been encouraging victimhood, and we should be encouraging courage and bravery and pride.
Young Israelis felt there was something, it was existential and they needed to fight, and when the call came, they were not found wanting.
Yes.
I would still nevertheless worry about given where we are with our many young people and indeed many older people in this country. What do you think also in terms of the West found wanting, in terms of Western media in particular, BBC, Sky News and others, their reporting of this war, so different from their reporting of, say, Ukraine or indeed any other war?
Yes.
Are the American and British bid to oust ISIS, for instance? Yes. I don't remember seeing every single report every day the exact number of children who had died.
Killed in Mosul.
And you mentioned the IDF. Now, the stats are very, very clear that the IDF has a record that is second to none in terms of any war ever fought, in terms of the ratio of civilian deaths to military deaths in its warfare, because of so many measures it takes to safeguard civilians. And yet constantly we are hearing about genocide. We are hearing about, the BBC still won't call Hamas a terrorist organisation. Some people claim it's a terrorist organisation, they say laughably. What do you make of how how Western governments, how Western media has been found wanting?
Several things. One is they fail to understand the nature of war. They completely fail. I see.
These are hard-bitten war reporters, some of them.
Some, but they completely misunderstand the nature of war, and crucially, they don't seem to believe that Israel has the right to fight for her own defence. I've been in Ukraine as well since the conflict began in 22. I was there again the other week. When I come back from the Ukrainian front lines, everybody I speak to in the West wants to know how the Ukrainian army is doing and whether they're pushing back the invading armies of Vladimir Putin. And our leaders are, whether you agree with it or not, are in lockstep with the Ukrainian government because Ukraine was invaded by a barbarous army. Well, Israel was invaded by a barbarous terrorist army. And just as I don't find it hard to be on the side of the Ukrainian people when they're fighting to liberate their homeland, I don't find it hard to be on the side of the Israeli people when they are seeking to liberate their homeland from jihadist terrorists. And the other thing is, quickly, of course, what you hear from the BBC types is, but maybe the Palestinians are just asserting their right to self-determination. There's lots of ways you can get a state. The Jewish people and the Zionist movement from the 19th century onwards showed how you get it, how you get a state and how you make it survive. The Palestinians have had multiple chances to get a state in 1948 and every decade since, right up until the 2000s, and again in recent years. But it's almost like there's a lesson here, Julia. If you want to get a state, don't try to genocide and annihilate your neighbours. Don't teach your young maths by things like, if you kill 2 Jews and then kill another 2 Jews, how many dead Jews have you got? Don't spend your evenings assembling rockets. Don't put RPGs under your baby's crib. Don't steal your neighbour's children. Don't hide people and torture them in captivity for a year and a half. Don't hold dead bodies as if they're prized objects that you can hand out in swap for terrorists who are being held in Israeli jails. It could all stop tomorrow if Hamas gave back the hostages and the people of Gaza brought up their children to believe in living in peace with their neighbours rather than trying to annihilate them.
This is the thing. It is really that simple. I always respond to people on social media. Have you tried giving the hostages back? But also, as a crucial aspect, what would it have been acceptable for Israel to do after that attack? Because I know darn well what every single Western nation would have done in the same circumstances.
If we have thousands of British people held in captivity in France in underground tunnels, being tortured and raped every day, I would hope that we would go into France and have a very stern response.
Absolutely. Can I just ask you, just briefly, I want to ask you about the Joe Rogan podcast. This made international news. You basically hitting back at people. Joe Rogan, I know you've done lots of podcasts with him, got on very well, but about platforming misinformation, particularly one of the fellow guests there that day, David Smith. You've now been backed by Donald Trump, even. What do you make of that row?
I haven't been backed by Donald Trump.
Well, my friend Douglas Murray said.
Well, President Trump read this new book and promoted it on his social media platforms. I think it was a coincidence it came out just after the Joe Rogan podcast. Yes, President Trump just said it's one of the best first-hand account of the conflict he's seen, and he knows the work I've done for the last 2 years covering this and seeing it with my own eyes.
Could you do one on Ukraine to persuade him of why he needs to back Ukraine?
It's an ongoing question.
Just suggesting.
I have made some forcible interventions in the New York Post, among other places, on that matter. The Joe Rogan thing, it's interesting. It seems to have sort of blown up. I don't really keep an eye on that kind of thing, but I gather some people just don't understand the point I was trying to make, which was, I love Joe, he's a friend, but for the last 18 months, 2 years, he's had almost no voices in who are supportive of the Ukrainian people. Only people who just talk about Ukrainian corruption are much more fine to talk about. But at some point, it looks kind of one-sided. Yep. Same with Israel and Hamas. He's invited all these conspiracy theorists on, and I'm afraid I just don't think he's invited enough people on with the other side, with the other view. With the facts. And the one I really mind, which I highlighted there, is he's been inviting, as various other people have on the American right, he's been inviting on these people who don't call themselves historians but pretend they're historians, and then they actually call themselves historians and then they're not. And I'll tell you that, Julia, it goes back to a point I made in the last book about the war on the West. The left came for Churchill because they knew that for us in Britain, he's our hero, because he's the figure who our grandparents rallied to and who got them
He's the reason we don't speak German.
He's the reason that Nazism didn't overwhelm all of us in the 1940s. Sure, Churchill didn't solve every problem for all time, but he solved the problem of his time. Now, the left used to go for Churchill. Now the right is going for Churchill in America. And I just cannot sit by and not point out, if you're diminishing the crimes of Adolf Hitler, and you're diminishing what happened in the Second World War against the Jewish people and against us, and you are attacking our wartime leader, you are on the wrong side.
It's just that simple.
It's that simple.
Okay.
And I wanted to point it out because it's not pointed out enough now in America, but, you know, other people have holy places, so do we. You don't come for our holy places in Britain.
Absolutely, just fine. I've got to ask, because I've thought this for a long time. Look, you're an author, you're a best-selling author, and you're a journalist, but you're also a campaigner. I mean, you're almost a preacher on some of the big issues. You are very passionate about the issues you write about. You've been ahead of the curve on so many key issues like immigration, the Islamist threat, the woke threat to the values of our Western civilization, which lots of people simply do not take seriously enough. Here's the question. I bet a lot of my audience would back me in this. Have you ever considered going into politics, standing for public office?
People ask on a semi-regular basis. There's nothing very appealing about politics in our country at the moment, for lots of reasons. My calculation always was that if I ever did join a political party, I'd probably lose the whip within the first week. Because the deal is you don't say what you think. And I'm afraid that the mainstream in politics in Britain still, to my mind, is not willing to grapple with the issues we have to grapple with.
Has any party leader approached you? Nigel Farage or anyone?
Well, I mean, the Liberal Democrats have been all over me for years.
And the Greens, I imagine, too.
The Greens. The Greens are forever wanting to double their MP intake. I'd love to stand in Brighton I have spoken. I feel, to tell the truth, that I can do a lot more, and I don't say this vainly. I feel like I can do a lot more by exercising my ability to speak freely.
Okay.
And without any whipping or, any party whipping, I mean.
Come on, though. Prime Minister Douglas Murray, you know that makes sense, everybody.
It would be a sound administration.
It would be a very sound...
And I think I'd have
That's a whole other interview.
I'd have Julia Hartley-Brewer as my Minister of Education and War.
Oh, totally up for all of that. Any job you'd give me. Dr. Murray, I would talk to you for the next hour and a half, but we've got to go to a break. They're shouting at me in the control room. It's always a pleasure. Your book is, as always, absolutely brilliant. It's a must-read. On democracies and death cults, Israel, Hamas and the future of the West. I cannot, as always, recommend it highly enough. Always a pleasure having you in the studio. Come on the show anytime. I know our audience always welcome hearing from you.
Pleasure to see you.
And I'd love to hear from you if you want to have your say on what Douglas Murray's had to say. I mean, vote. Let's just start a campaign to get him to run for office, eh? 8344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, we're going to take some of your calls. We are also going to be talking more about two-tier policing with Harry Miller. He knows about it as a former copper. Somebody got arrested as well. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Before July last year, before the general election, we had some advanced negotiations with this company to put considerably more investment into the UK, into the transition to electric arc furnaces. And we think that the government dropped the ball when they came in July. They had no plan. When we asked them about this in the Commons, they would just say they were developing a steel strategy. And what we can see is that they've dropped the ball in these negotiations.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you very much to Douglas Murray for joining us. I know you all have all very much enjoyed that. Always just a fantastic interview. Throughout that, Sam Armstrong sitting in the studio felt rather cool not coming to you, but I know in terms of what he had to say and October 7th, and again, the canary in the coal mine of anti-Semitism, how the West, particularly the left, has been found wanting. It's all absolutely fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and what stands out to me is I don't actually think that the left hate Israel because of itself or because of Jewish people per se. I think they hate Israel and I think they hate Jews because they are doing what the West is not doing, which is standing up for themselves, which is defending themselves from the destruction of Westernism, Western civilization, and everything we hold dear. And that to them is offensive because they are hell-bent on a mission that has been going on now for 75, 80 years to destroy our culture, to destroy our values and everything we stand for. And boy, are they winning, by the way. Yeah. And we've been talking about 5 different stories today, how we sold off our steel to the Chinese, how we've got terrorist attacks going on within our prisons, how that we're being told that there is no two-tier policing, how we've lost control of our borders. But most of all, actually, about how Birmingham has just gone to mess. And I think if you live in Bath or Bexley or Bournemouth or Bury, if you want to know what the left have in store for you, look at Birmingham. Birmingham is a city that 150 years ago was held up as the global standard for how to run a modern civilization. Today, it cannot even perform its most basic functions. Rats run that city, literal rats run around as big as you can see. Yeah. It has been taken over by diversity to the extent that we saw policing there that was two-tier. Muslim mobs, hordes coming onto the street, threatening violence, and weren't being tackled. And it has been destroyed in part, the finances of that city, by DEI, by the fact it was said that they had to pay...
Ridiculous court ruling.
Ridiculous rulings.
Equal work of equal value.
And Birmingham is a model, and it will be held up by historians in centuries to come as a case study in how you destroy Western civilization. Just as children today learn about how Rome fell, we will look to how Birmingham fell, to how one of the greatest cities on earth was left to rot by an ideology that hates us and all that we stand for.
And still our second city. And also my birthplace, you know, my parents met at uni there, and my birthplace there. And it is, so you always, you know, I lived there only till I was 7 years old, but you can always hold a candle for, you know, your birthplace where you first lived. It is absolutely harrowing to see what's going on. And again, it is a city that's undergone, should we say, rather large demographic and cultural changes, which I think may have impacted on much of the decision making as well. Let's go to the calls quickly though. 0344 499 1000. I promise Harry Miller's waiting all night. We'll get to you very soon. Grace is in London. Grace, you want to respond to something that Douglas Murray said?
Well, there are lots of things that could
I know.
be said.
I mean,
I think that
you could talk to him all 3 hours. You never run out of things to talk about.
One thing that really strikes me is the tribalism. I think it's not only a matter of values, but I think that tribalism is at the root of all kinds of human problems. I'm perturbed often, since I'm often quite on the left in terms of political issues, but a lot of people on the left seem far more concerned about a single place in our world where people are suffering, i.e. Gaza, than any other place in our world where people are suffering. They don't seem to talk about people who still don't have clean water. They don't talk about people who are suffering from other conflicts in our world, such as Sudan and Congo. They're only concerned about the people who are suffering and starving in Gaza. And I'm concerned about those people in Gaza, but I think that the fact that...
It's not the only place.
It's very tribal. And I think that there are lots of ways across the political spectrum that tribalism is a thing. And when we talk about Western values, I'm often slightly unsure as to how we define them.
That's the problem.
But
that's the problem. No other society has a problem with that.
Well, I mean, the historian Tom Holland has talked a bit about how a lot of the things that we now take for granted and think of as just normal and a given are linked back to how the teachings of Jesus spread through our
Judeo-Christian culture. But also people think that these are all talk about universal human rights. There's no such thing. These are entirely Western concepts. They are pushed by Britain and other countries.
One of the things about Jesus' teachings was that he kind of overcame the instinctive tribalism that humans can have, because he said, when he was asked about how we should love our neighbours, he said, actually, your neighbours are people who are different from you. In the story of the Good Samaritan, they're specifically people who are different. So he's superseding the tribalism, and he's saying that you need to love people irrespective of their being different from you.
And being liberal and tolerant of people in different religions, different differences from you. But again, that's not what we see in any other society other than the West. That's the crucial thing. Grace, fantastic call, really thoughtful. Thank you so much, really appreciate that. Just wanted to bring you some breaking news here. You'll remember ahead of last year's general election, it emerged there were a number of people involved in the Conservative Party who, and indeed a former police officer as well, who were accused of basically putting money on the bookies on whether or not the election day would be called. It was much earlier than many had expected. Well, the Gambling Commission has today charged 15 people with betting offences related to last year's general election. They include the former Conservative MP for Montgomeryshire, Craig Williams, and a former police officer, Jeremy Hunt, no relation. Also charged a Welsh Conservative Senate member, Russell George, former director of Conservative Party campaigning, Anthony Lee, his wife, Laura Sanders, and a former Tory candidate for Bristol North West, also on the list of 15 names. Bring you more on that as we get it. 11:37 is the time. We're going to take a break now, and then we're going to be talking about two-tier policing in this country. Apparently, according to a group of MPs on the Home Affairs Select Committee, doesn't exist. And even claiming that it does exist is completely scandalous and awful. I'm going to talk to former police officer Harry Miller about that. Up next, this is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. 11:39 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next topic and talking about, well, the police, two-tier policing, which does not exist, but, extraordinary recruitment that basically penalises white candidates, which we know absolutely for a fact now. They're admitting it openly now, saying the quiet bit out loud, does exist. Let's talk about all of this now with former police officer and founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. Very good morning to you, Harry.
Good morning,
Thank
Julia.
you for joining us.
Very depressing reading is the Southport 24 report.
I have to say, well, let's give us a moment to ask you a question, my lovely. Let's talk about that first, because the report's by a Home Affairs Select Committee. It's 11 members, 7 of them are Labour, 2 of them are Lib Dem, 2 of them are Tory, one of them certainly, I mean, could put a yellow rosette on her any day of the week, you wouldn't notice. But they said there was no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the Southport riots. And they said they also talked about how prosecutors let fake news spread by blocking the release of some facts, which wouldn't in any way prejudice the trial of Axel Rudikabana, the Southport killer, and that led to part of the problem. But when they say there's no evidence of two-tier policing, what did you make of that?
It's complete and utter nonsense. I mean, they not only said that, they said that the suggestion is disgraceful and unsubstantiated. Well, it's not disgraceful. We can see it with our own eyes. Let's ask Lucy Connolly, for instance, if there is two-tier policing. What did she do? She put out a fairly injudicious, angry...
No, it was a really nasty, horrible tweet. Let's be honest about what it was.
Yeah, it was, but she took it down 4 hours later. Yeah. Now, that's the kind of thing that would have been said in pubs across the country, right the way through Britain and abroad. And the response to the atrocity in Southport is to get absolutely furious, because those children are, in fact, our children, the children of us all. And we saw this, and the natural response is to get angry, and sometimes anger goes over the top. But what Lucy Connolly did, she simply spoke, then went for a walk, thought about it, and took back her words. Yeah. As I say, this happens all over the place. The police went after her, and she's been fast-tracked through the criminal justice system and thrown in jail for over 2 years, when some of the actual rioters got less. Yeah. This is two-tier policing. The police cracked down on people who suggested, in a vacuum of information, that the murderer was probably something to do with immigration and probably something to do with Islam. We were told that we were stirring up hatred by mentioning that, and it turns out, after all, we were correct. Now,
he had an Al-Qaeda manual and was later charged with a terror offence. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's an awful lot of talk about criminalising misinformation. But what about withholding information? The police had good information, which they simply withheld. And there's nothing like fear to spark violence, and nothing sparks fear like the dark.
And also, again, it was all this, people got to remember this, was also the context of the two-tier policing we've seen in recent years. And again, getting to the justice system, which we've definitely seen clearly. I mean, they're open about it now. They're literally talking openly about giving people different sentences and different, mitigating factors based on the colour of their skin and religion and the like. But we saw just a few weeks before Southport, we saw the Hare Hills riot, where the police just basically, they just ran away for hours on end, leaving people to ransack their local streets and burn buses and goodness knows what. And because it wasn't, should we say, white indigenous population, that apparently wasn't such an issue. We saw in 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, we were told, largely peaceful. Well, not the footage I saw was it remotely largely peaceful. And the policing of that compared with, say, the policing of anti-lockdown protests, which I went on, which were largely peaceful, very, very peaceful indeed, and yet police went in with batons. We see the policing, if anyone's got an England flag anywhere near their march, even though they're to protect statues and the like from Black Lives Matter and others, we saw the police going in very heavy-handed. It is not possible to have eyes and ears in this country and not see the difference in the policing style. Is there, as a former copper yourself, is there any reason why that would be the case, but nothing to do with, community cohesion concerns and woke concerns, but actually that you do police different groups of people differently?
Yeah, of course you police different groups of people differently. You do a risk assessment, and if you've got a high risk group that tends towards violence, you police them differently. Say from a bunch of
young white men,
WI women. Out on a protest. Of course, you make risk assessments. The problem here is, if you tell me that there is a demonstration next week, if you tell me who is demonstrating, I will be able to tell you how the police are going to police it. And it won't be to do with risk. It will be to do with ideology. As you rightly point out, if England flags are being flown, it will be one sort of policing. If it's Palestinian flags being flown, it will be another sort of policing. In fact, I was at a march in Pride in, I think it was August, September of last year, where the chief constable was actually marching behind a bunch of protesters shouting from the river to the sea and waving their Palestinian flags. Now, can you imagine that happening behind a bunch of people waving Union Jacks? It wouldn't happen. It simply wouldn't happen. So this idea that there is two-tier policing, the police don't admit it because they dare not look the truth squarely in.
And that's that is the really big concern, isn't it? And again, I think you're a police officer. You've been at the sharp end of this, and I know my audience listening and watching right now will completely accept. You're throwing bricks at the police. You're threatening the police. You're going to get arrested, and they should go in heavy-handed. I've got no issue there. You're threatening people in an asylum hotel or anything like that. Absolutely, I want you arrested. I want you off the streets, and I want you behind bars. I've got no issue with that, and most people don't. But there were ordinary, peaceful people who were genuinely angry, genuinely concerned. They were demonstrating in Southport and other places, and they kind of got somehow, there's lots of reports, they sort of kettled up and caught up with the people who were protesting it and got treated the same. But we also saw footage, again, on mainstream media of a large group of men. They were protesting as a community, as Muslim men. They were worried about their communities, understandable, given the context at the time, armed with baseball bats and goodness knows what other weapons, on a roundabout. Literally, police didn't go in, police didn't do anything. If that had been a bunch of white men or anyone of any other religion, the police would have gone in. And that's as simple as that, isn't it?
Absolutely. Can you imagine a police officer standing in front of a crowd of white Union Jack England flag waving people and saying, guys, if you don't mind, just put your weapons back in Wetherspoons and collect them later.
Which is virtually what they said. Could they take their weapons back to the mosque?
That's precisely what happened. So this is two-tier policing. And the police treat us like idiots. They think that we can't see. Well, we can see, and we don't like it. And it should not come as a surprise when the mob gets angry. Now, this report, the Southport 24 report, it seems much more concerned with how to police an angry mob than it is with tackling why they're angry in the first place. If the police were a little bit more honest, if the police took seriously grooming gangs, if the police didn't criminalise people who expressed concern about immigration, if the police stopped picking sides and waving flags and marching with left-wing nutters, then the accusation of two-tier policing might indeed be unsubstantiated.
Yeah, indeed.
We can't substantiate it.
Well, also, when a lot of it's actually in black and white, quite literally on paper, we've had the reports about West Yorkshire Police. Basically, you get 48 hours notice to apply to join the police if you're white. If you're from a religious or a minority ethnic group, you can apply any day of the year. You're given help and support, basically told how to do well in the interview. But absolutely, there's no discrimination, not doing anything illegal. Of course not. They insist when it's blatantly obvious to everyone that is absolutely, I mean, it should be certainly against the law. But even we've seen an extraordinary situation. This is exclusive in our story, in our station today, about police forces basically having a diversity drive, encouraging people with no GCSEs, even barely speaking English, to apply to join the police. And a whistleblower pointing out they're basically asked to go out to areas largely, ethnic minority populated areas, get people, talk to them about joining the police, get them to sign up. It doesn't matter if they'll ever get through or not, if they're up to scratch, but as long as you've got a tick in the box saying they've said they expressed interest, then you're doing something worthwhile. But by the way, they don't have time to go to attend a burglary.
Yeah, that's right. The police are far more interested in chasing down diversity targets than they are in chasing and catching criminals. And this is a national scandal. I mean, you look at recent stories where the police go in heavy-handed against somebody's, last week it was heavy-handed against a mother who'd confiscated a laptop.
Yeah.
This wouldn't happen.
No, the iPads of our own kids.
Yeah, exactly. The iPads of our own kids. Exactly. This cannot possibly happen if you have a legally literate police force. Let's not beat around the bush. Law is meant to be a little bit difficult. Law is meant to be slightly complicated. You can't be a thickie and deal in law, and you cannot be a thickie and be a police officer and expect to apply the law. And unfortunately, we have lost we've got an entire generation of police officers who do not seem to understand the law. And I don't blame them. I blame the College of Policing. I blame...
Well, they're too busy doing DEI training and putting their rainbow face paint on rather than learning about the law. I always find it extraordinary how often I see these cases, and I think that is a police officer who knows less about the law than me, because I did my journalism training. I find that, frankly, terrifying. Harry Miller, absolutely fantastic always to have you on the show. Former police officer, founder of Fair Cop. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk to you again very soon. I have a funny feeling these stories are going to keep propping up until we actually get some sanity. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
By the way, I've heard in the last few days that Tata Steel, who, of course, have done the deal with the government, they shut the blast furnaces down at Port Talbot last autumn, they are going to build a new electric arc furnace, but I'm told they'll never turn it on because it'll never be viable, but they will have banked the hundreds of millions of government support. This is the sort of madness and nonsense that's going on because of Net Stupid Zero, and it drives me bonkers every day of the week.
And nobody can afford to run either of these places, any of them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. What a rip-roaring show we have got today. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Sam, just a really brief response before we go to another topic, but just a really brief response on where we are on that two-tier policing, Harry Miller.
Well, I just can't understand how these people, these MPs, believe that we will be convinced or persuaded by this. They are literally attempting to pull the wool over our eyes, expect us not to see what is staring us in the face.
Do not believe the evidence before your eyes and ears. Yeah.
But that is our society today. They are literally lying to us and expecting us to believe it and get frustrated when we don't.
I often think, like, do they know we can see them? That's always my question. 11:53 is the time. Let's talk right now about the latest on Trump tariffs. Steve Gill joins us. He's a former advisor to both Clinton and Bush Jr. administrations. Very good morning to you, Steve.
Hey, Julie,
Hey,
good morning.
I'm sorry, time is short because we've had such a busy show. There's so much to talk about here. My God, you're never short of stories in America as well. Donald Trump, after a massive climb down, many are saying, when it comes to tech imports from China, the mobile phones, laptops, other computer and tech gadgets, which had otherwise been facing a 125% import tax. He climbed down on that, no tax, no tariffs on those. But he insisted yesterday there'll be no more exemptions in the tariffs. And he said absolutely nobody, he says, is getting off the hook for the unfair trade balances. What does he mean by that?
I think he's also said that there are going to be different pools of products that are given different tariff levels, which is interesting because there's been this sort of overall blanket number that's been applied both with respect to the EU, with respect to other countries. I think the other thing is that the pause that is getting so much attention, and the EU has now said they're going to pause tariffs to give time for things to work out, is you have about 100 countries that have said, yeah, we want to negotiate. These are very complicated deals. You can't just do it very quickly. So it does take time to put pen to paper and work out the details. So I don't think this pause means that Trump is backing off or that the EU is backing off.
Would it have been a good idea to do the detail and do this a bit slower before the announcement of the tariffs?
No, I'll tell you that, Julia, as a lawyer, you never actually strike a deal until you're on the courthouse steps. So there wouldn't have been this movement by countries saying, okay, yeah, we'll reduce our tariffs to something reasonable and reciprocity had they were not facing execution day and liberation day, as Trump called it. So you have to take the step to get people to actually negotiate in reality.
Well, you say Liberation Day or Execution Day, but actually, it's the American consumers that were going to be upset when it comes to, say, the iPhone. And we know there's been massive lobbying by his big tech bros. I mean, they were sitting in front of the cabinet at his inauguration. We know how much contact he has with them. But basically, pointing out that the cost of an iPhone was going to be $3,000 in a few weeks' time because of the massive import duties. Basically, that wasn't going to fly with Trump voters, was it? So basically, he was forced to pipe down and back down. But the reality is, anyone could have told him that 80% of those sort of electronic goods come from China, and putting a 125% tariff on Chinese goods would do that. So is it possible that no one thought this through?
Well, I think you have to take these steps. I mean, most of our pharmaceuticals come from China. We're just going to keep letting them provide the necessary drugs we need, the electronics. You have to move these not only to U.S. manufacturing, but to other more friendly manufacturers. And we were already seeing these plants and facilities move from China to Vietnam.
Hold on a minute. Those are two different things. Moving your manufacturing to India or Vietnam or Malaysia, I think absolutely makes sense as less hostile, dangerous nations than China. I get that. However, moving those factories to the U.S., completely different matter. But if you move them to the U.S., they will cost more.
But you also have shoe manufacturers, tennis shoe manufacturers that are still in that $100 to $150 range that Nike charges for shoes made in China. So it is possible to make things in the U.S. and not have this astronomical price that the hysterics on the left and in the media are touting. Again, American-made New Balance shoes are not that expensive, although Nike shoes are being charged at that same rate, even though they're being made for $3 an hour in China.
Well, why didn't they set their factory up in America in the first place then? And
well,
you know why?
Because the
costs are so cheap. Yeah, but the labour costs aren't going to change, are they? The ratio of labour costs in a Southeast Asian country, whether it's China or Malaysia or India, compared to in Milwaukee, they're still going to have that disparity.
Well, first of all, you are having a shoe sold by New Balance. It's about $150. Nike's doing the same thing. The difference is Nike can make a much more dramatically huge profit. Yeah. The same way if you have these
it's what private companies do. So wait a minute, are you telling me Donald Trump's against profit now?
No, but there is a difference in profit that is fair and reasonable, like New Balance is getting, making shoes and creating jobs in the US.
How much profit should Elon Musk make, do you think?
I think you can make whatever profit you make as long as you're playing fair. And keep in mind that China has never played fair. When you have a product that you take to China, you're going to see it stolen, the intellectual property stolen, and you'll be competing with that product immediately. They have violated that. In China, and again, Trump is talking about tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade. If I've got a truckload of vegetables that are being met at the border with like a 2-week, 3-week delay so it rots, about the third time that happens, I stop exporting my agriculture products. So there's a lot of other areas of this trade balance that is unfair, and Trump's exposing that as well as just the taxes.
Do you think, I mean, literally one sentence, if you could, I'd be very kind of you. Do you think these tariffs are all going to go away and the deals are going to be done, or do you think they're going to stick and then you're going to have everyone on string? But again, you can't have both.
I think they're moving very, very quickly. I think, again, the EU, which was saying adamantly no, is now at the table. You're seeing countries like India, like Vietnam and others move to zero tariffs. That parity of tariffs that has been unfair for so long is coming. It'll take a little while, but I think by the end of this 90-day pause, we're going to see dramatic reduction of tariffs on U.S. products. It's
going to be fascinating to watch. Steve Gill, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to talk to you. So much more to talk about. We're going to have the headlines next. Up next, we're going to talk to the wonderful, brilliant whistleblower on the grooming gangs, Maggie Oliver, about what she wants to happen next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. Fantastic to have your company. So with me, I'm delighted to say, is Sam Armstrong, who's a commentator. You're not getting as many words in as we normally get because we've had so many fantastic top guests alongside you today. But I know you're going to be very interested in our next topic, which is child sexual abuse survivors and a whistleblower, who we'll talk to you in just a moment, launching a fundraiser to investigate taking legal action against people in authority who failed to protect the tens of thousands of victims of grooming gangs in the UK. We're going to be joined by whistleblower Maggie Oliver in just a couple of moments. We're also going to be talking about the mother who was banned from her daughter's primary school after complaining about the way gender issues were being taught to pupils. And women-only spaces, we're told, are going to be protected in an overhaul of equality laws under plans being considered by the government. Question is actually, will they? We'll talk about that. There's a very big Supreme Court judgment coming out on Wednesday as well, which is going to talk about that. Plus, Labour's Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband, he called on Brits to fly less to save the planet. He, though, has a carbon footprint 12 times higher than the average Briton, and it's been revealed that he's racked up at least 44,600 air miles in the job since last July. A green zealot being a hypocrite. Never. I've never heard of that before. Sam Armstrong, I mean, I mean, we'll get to all of those topics, but just before we go to our guest, the grooming gang story, I think, ties in very closely with the other big story we've been talking about today about two-tier policing and this Home Affairs Select Committee report that claims, it is disgraceful to even suggest there has been two-tier policing in this country. Not certainly in the wake of the Southport riots. But one of the reasons why people were so angry and upset, and yes, there was criminality, those people deserve to be prosecuted, to be charged, to be behind bars. But ordinary people who've never dreamed of being racist or bigoted or criminal in any way, that they were equally horrified by what happened. And this general feeling, after seeing what's happened with the grooming gangs, that the authorities turn a blind eye to the actions of certain communities simply because of what they call community cohesion, rather than treating everybody the same. And these stories are all linked, aren't they?
They are absolutely linked, and it is no wonder that people get angry and upset when they see time and time again, when it comes to problems, and I'm not saying that there are total problems, but individual problems amongst specific ethnic groups in this country, their approach seems to be see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, just try and move over as fast as possible. And the trouble for the authorities with this kind of, oh no, don't talk about two-tier policing, oh no, stop talking about the grooming gangs, is eventually people understand, they can see with their own eyes, it's happening in their local towns, what's going on, and they begin to stop trusting in the police, stop trusting in the courts. And the trouble with that, the difficulty with that, is not just that it's wrong, it's that when people lose faith in the courts, when people lose faith in the police, what do? They wrongly, don't get me wrong, wrongly begin to take the law into their own hands. And that is why it's so essential we can all have faith in the police.
Absolutely.
And our own liberal institutions have failed us so badly that for great swathes of the public, they simply don't trust them any longer.
Absolutely, and it's such a big concern. Well, look, welcome now to Maggie Oliver. She is a former detective constable at Greater Manchester Police. She was the key whistleblower on the Rochdale grooming gang case, and she's the founder of the brilliant charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation. She joins us, I'm delighted to say, in the studio. Maggie, welcome. I have to say, what a day to be talking about this in the wake of that no two-tier policing. My God, we saw two-tier policing when it came to the grooming gangs. You are one of the absolute heroes of this awful blot on our nation's history, blot on our nation's present right now today, in terms of exposing the grooming gangs issue and the fact that it was not being prosecuted because of the ethnicity and the religion of the perpetrators largely, and the ethnicity and the religion of the victims. Today you're here not to sort of just go over old ground and just keep talking about it and just keep talking and talking. You're doing enough amazing work with your foundation helping the victims as it is. But you today are launching, along with some of the victims, a fundraiser. What is this fundraiser for?
It's called #TheyKnew, because people at the top of the police, of social services, of the council, all knew what was going on and chose to ignore it. They turned away. I've spent 20 years sharing the truth and the evidence with police complaints, with the IOPC, with the government, with the Home Office. The evidence is there.
And you resigned your job to do so.
I resigned my job, but nobody wants to hear it.
So when we have, we had things like that big report, independent report into Baroness J, into this, what happened with gangs, and it only very briefly touched on.
It was a whitewash, Julia.
Well, we were told we learned a lot from that, but there was nothing to learn from that.
I was a non-institutional core participant in that. I was denied an opportunity to speak. We have the evidence. What we need is a legal team, not the government, who will brush it under the carpet, will do something with it. It's about holding individuals to account who have knowingly failed in their duty to prosecute serial child sex abusers. And the evidence is there, but it goes into a pot and it goes under the carpet and nobody does anything with it. We need the funds to pay the limited costs of a very experienced team of barristers, of lawyers, of professionals who will look at the evidence.
They're not going to be getting rich on this. They are not.
They are giving their time, and there will be an intention at the end of it to hold individuals to account, because I believe we need justice for those who have been failed. This is primarily to push for change in the future.
Well, this is it, because we're always told whenever we have an inquiry, lessons will be learned. We'll act on the recommendations. Very rarely are any lessons learned, and very rarely actually any action taken at the end of inquiry. There's a lot of talk about how we need to have a full national public statutory judge-led inquiry where people are forced, whether it's a councillor on Rochdale Council, whether it's a police officer in Rotherham, a social worker elsewhere, that they are forced to give evidence and under oath, under penalty of perjury and being sent to prison. And that is the only way we are going to find out what really happened. Do you support those calls?
I support victims having a voice, but it's what you do with those voices. The evidence is there.
It's already there.
It's there. I worked on Operation Augusta. We had 97 abusers. We had 70 children. 5 officers were referred for investigation by the IOPC. They deliberately closed down a live investigation because they wouldn't put resources in. They are still walking the streets. Nobody wants to take that legal action. I want to see them in a court of law, and whether that's a private prosecution or otherwise.
What could you prosecute them for?
For neglect of duty, for misconduct in a public office. We have the laws to say that a 40, 50, 60-year-old man can't rape a 12-year-old child. So when senior officers and chief constables then choose to turn away, that is criminal neglect to me. And yet why has nobody ever taken a grip? Because they don't want to.
And nobody has been prosecuted. Because it's now been accepted, has it not? It's been accepted that that police did turn a blind eye. And it wasn't just the police. It was local councillors, it was council officials, it was social workers, it was care workers, girls turning up with their their abuser who was 30 years their senior to hospital pregnant. And no one being prosecuted. This was across the board. This happened on a grand scale. And again, it wasn't just in Rochdale or Rotherham. We now think 45 to 50 town cities where not only it happened, but it is probably still happening today. Thousands upon thousands of girls who were victims of this.
But Julie, what I would say is that this is about the people at the top making policy decisions that these children are not a priority. It's not about the one
the
or
individual
two.
copper.
No, it isn't, because
often they were acting.
They want to do something, but they are being prevented when the Gold Command Group will close down an investigation because they won't put resources in. That is not the fault of a detective on the ground. These are people at the top. We've got Keir Starmer saying this is far-right extremists who are making a big fuss like me. It's been 20 years of my life, and I want something to change. And for me, this is the only way to do it. It's survivor-led, it's evidence-driven. We need money to pay for barristers, solicitors, but these people are giving their time. Not all pro bono. There will be costs, but a minimal cost. They won't be charging the going rate.
But they bring their expertise,
so
and you need that.
Please help.
And you're working with some quite prominent victims. Tell us.
Samantha Smith, who was she's a very powerful advocate for how victims have been failed in Telford. Elizabeth Harper, she's a survivor of Rotherham. I have got countless victims who have got ample evidence.
And again, ample evidence that they went to the police, they went to the social workers, they went to the police, they told people in authority, this is happening to me. They were able to provide evidence and nothing was done.
Absolutely nothing. This isn't connected with my charity at all. This is completely separate. But we need change for the future so we don't have more generations of children being abandoned in the same way that I've seen.
What do you
thousands.
make? Look, what do you make of somebody? I mean, look, the people perpetrating, the men, again, largely Pakistani origin and heritage, that's been well established now in this particular modus operandi of grooming, targeting young white working class girls because they thought they had no value and they could get away with it, and they were trash. It didn't matter how they treated them. And again, it turned out they were quite right because the authorities seemed to agree with them. But we know that those are evil, awful men. Thankfully, more and more of them are now going behind bars. Far too many of them are now coming out from prison because we simply do not charge people with enough. We just simply don't put them away for enough time. I mean, the idea that you could gang rape a child for years and you're not just coming out in a box, which is what you should do, is I think bizarre to most of us. But in terms of the people who knew it was happening, the police officers who were told to arrest the father who went to try and save his daughter as she was being gang raped. I know. I mean, I can't even imagine what that parent goes through. But those people, what do you think went through their minds? What do you think the reasoning was?
I think there are multiple reasons. I always say, you know, Ruby from Three Girls, pregnant at just 13, a fetus locked in a property system.
With clear DNA that would have proved she'd been raped. Because you can't have sex legally when you're 13.
No, and she had special educational needs. You know, the Crown Prosecution Service decided not to charge that man with rape, with conspiracy to commit sexual activity with a child. They are deliberate decisions. I always say, if that had been the Chief Constable's daughter or Keir Starmer's daughter, would that charge have been adequate? And I would say no. So there's a judgment of the children that they don't matter. They come from a lower class. They are already vulnerable, though, and that's why we have a duty to step in.
But we know that paedophiles and rapists and perpetrators, we know they target those children deliberately.
Absolutely, but that is our responsibility as a civilised society. Then our public bodies step in and protect those children, and individuals in those organisations have made decisions deliberately to abandon those children.
But this is the thing for me, and in some way, I often think these people who don't protect those girls, not only do they not prosecute them years after the fact when they're no longer a threat, but they know they're doing it today, tomorrow, next week, and other girls are going to be victims. If you are not someone who would do that yourself, but you allow that to go on, are you not someone, I mean, you know better, and yet you allow it to continue to happen? You wouldn't allow it to happen to your own child, but you allow it to happen to someone else's. In some ways, for me, they're almost more immoral.
And
do you know what I mean?
You know what, Julia? It's being abandoned by the state that damages those children more than the abuse. And really, the more I've gone through this in the last 20 years, I think in these public institutions, by the time people get to the top of those institutions, their priority is to protect the organisation and not to prosecute the abusers and their job. And this campaign is meant to draw a line under that and make sure that people in office today know that if they don't do their duty, in 10 years' time, they may be standing. There is going to be a punishment.
And we have that understanding when we talk about, corporate manslaughter cases with big businesses, that we've had this over the cladding, Grenfell, that actually there needs to be a penalty that is serious for failure to act, or to act in a sort of, oh, well, I didn't really know. Oh, well, never mind. You did know. And as you say, this is the hashtag. People can search for the crowdfunder under the hashtag they knew.
Hashtag they knew. Go to my Maggie Oliver UK on X or LinkedIn.
We'll tweet it out as well.
And please tweet it out, because without, I can't do this. I know the evidence is there because I've seen it for 20 years.
You've got evidence yourself as a former police officer from these cases.
I'm the facilitator.
But in terms of Sammy Smith and I mean other women who were victims as girls, they know the names of the people they spoke to. Yeah. They know what they said to those people. They can provide evidence.
That evidence to me if you want to. I will share it with the legal teams and they will investigate and pull together a case that will prove that people in high places have failed in their duty. Yeah. That's the point of this, because I know victims want to be heard, and that this is the best place for them to do that.
It's not just about wanting to heard, them getting the justice they deserve far too late and far too little, but it's also about preventing this happening to more girls. Yeah, this isn't a historic crime. This is a here and now crime too.
Yeah, it really is, Julia, and that's why we've called it Action for Accountability. Yeah, because without accountability, there is no deterrent from people in high office today to change the way they view these children, and it will continue.
Yeah. What did you make of the decision last week by the Home Office, announced by Jess Phillips, a woman who's actually spent years campaigning, to stop violence against girls and women, basically saying they downgrading this, I thought, rather weak pledge from Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, back in January, for £5 billion to be spent on 5 different towns to do their own inquiries, but judge-led, and that would now be sort of victim-led panels and the like. Complete downgrading of this issue. Do you think there's any possibility that any local council or any other could actually institute an investigation into what they themselves and their senior police officers and their social workers and their care workers did so wrong? I mean, you cannot trust people to investigate the crimes that they are part of, can you?
No, you can't. That's why I'm trying another way. I've spent years sharing facts of neglect and corruption at the highest places, and they do not want to do anything. I don't think Jess Phillips is a bad person. It's the system, and anybody in that system has to do as they're told. They don't want to uncover the truth. I don't trust any of them.
Why don't they want to?
Because it will rock boats that they don't want to
It goes
rock.
too high up.
It goes too high up. There has been in my opinion, there's been systemic failures that they do not want to bring out into the open. But the problem is, the country now knows. That the country and the public know this has been, it's been a shameful neglect of children, and the rest of the world knows. Why are we
Elon
not
Musk
acting?
publicised that. Yeah, again, it is. I think it's utterly bewildering to most of us. That's the thing. I think it's just so incomprehensible because the vast majority of people, I think we think if we were in that scenario, we had information, we would stop it from happening. And yet people whose job it was to stop it didn't. And it's almost too painful to even comprehend that that's what people in officialdom are like.
You're dead right. I mean, I left my job because I could not believe what I was seeing. Yeah. You know, 16 years of my life dedicated to upholding the law, promising to protect the vulnerable, and yet I see chief constables and chief prosecutors making a choice they're not going to do anything about a child that's raped on a daily basis. Why? And I still can't answer that question, but I know that if it's left to them in power, they will do nothing.
And people like you are going to have to do it. So tell us again, where can people find out information about how they can donate to help this cause?
It's #TheyKnew. It's a crowd justice campaign. Go to Maggie Oliver UK on X or LinkedIn. I will be sharing the links. Maybe you can share the links.
100%.
And it is for the best legal brains that I can find to fight this from the perspective of somebody who doesn't want to brush it under the carpet. It can be done. I know it can be done. The evidence is powerful. We just need somebody who wants to do something with it, and that is not the government.
I think it's a magnificent cause, Maggie Oliver. I really do. Listening to all of that, I'm sure. Look, you're very close. I mean, you're very close to Robert Jenrick, Shadow Justice Secretary. He's spoken out a lot about this. You've got a lot of influence, a lot of Tories. Could you get them all to share this campaign and let's push this?
Well, I hope so. But can I just say, actually, how wrong I think it is that it falls to the likes of Maggie to conduct and to crowdfund for the investigation and prosecution of those officials that cover this up. Just one group of these offenders, the men that were actually doing it, the Rotherham group, got 611 grand in legal aid from the taxpayer in order to defend themselves against these charges. I don't have a particular problem about that.
People have to get,
people have to have their lawyers paid for, and they got, and it proves to me that they definitely were guilty. But I know with 600 grand, Maggie could run an extraordinary investigation that would get to the bottom of this. How wrong it is that the state, the people that we pay our taxes to, have not conducted this work. So it does fall to people who care about victims, to people who care about this country, to reach into their own pocket at a tough time to pay for it. And it's wrong, but that's the only way we're going to get justice.
Absolutely.
Because the authorities
Can I just say that none of the victims involved, myself, we are not making a penny from this.
Of course not.
But it's going to be a lot of work. It'll be thousands and thousands of pages of evidence. It might take a year.
It's not to come to fruition, in a month's time.
No,
but someone's got to do it.
It's a fighting fund to hold those to account that need to be held to account.
Absolutely fantastic work, Maggie Oliver, former Detective Constable, Greater Manchester Police, the whistleblower in the Rochdale grooming case case as well. You're an absolute hero, I think, to so many of my audience, certainly to me, and I know to Sam as well. Thank you for everything that you do. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. It ties in very closely to what we're asking about today in terms of the report by MPs and the Home Affairs Select Committee. There is no evidence of two-tier policing in the handling of the Southport riots, but of course that's all linked in with the grooming gangs and clear two-tier policing, because if the ethnicities and religions of the perpetrators and the victims have been swapped over, I think we all know what would have happened, and that just cannot be tenable in our society. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Calls are charged at the national rate. You can send a text on 87222. Text costs £1 standard network rate message. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. It's free, of course, on YouTube. Do get in touch. We'll get some of your messages up next. This is Talk.
listening software has been inserted into smartphones used by political aides, civil servants who report directly to Keir Starmer. Phones can be devastating espionage tools. Not only can spies eavesdrop on conversations, on top secret conversation, they can read every text, even encrypted messages apps like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company. I have to say, this is I'm going to say it's not my bit. It's just the amazing guests we've had on today. What an extraordinary show that we have had today. Sam Armstrong's still with me as a commentator. I mean, I do think Maggie Oliver is. I mean, she's just one of those heroes, one of those people who just went, I'm going to give up my career. I'm not going to allow this to happen. This grooming gang's not going to allow it to happen. Not on my watch. I'm going to stop it. It's an amazing this campaign they knew. Very different from what, say, Rupert Lowe is talking about. He was, of course, Reform MP. All his battles with Nigel Farage, but he's talking about how one of the things he's criticised Nigel Farage, and he's not gone hard enough on grooming gangs. Nigel Farage was talking about this stuff way before it became sort of almost even safe to talk about it. But Rupert Lowe was like crowdfunding for and as he said, proper inquiry. But again, we know inquiries don't count. They don't do anything useful. We know we know a lot of this already, as Maggie Oliver says. What we need is to have, if people are not forced by a judge, to give evidence under oath, it doesn't really count for anything. What we need is to get on with action, don't we?
Yeah, well, actually, I do think we do need a full national inquiry.
But only if it's statutory.
Statutory inquiry chaired by a judge who can compel witnesses to come to court to give evidence under penalty of perjury to force them to tell the truth. Because we have seen allegations coming out over the weekend that people in Bradford, police officers in Bradford, were deliberately attempting to suppress what was going on, or the uncovering of what was going on. And I think there is so much more to know. We heard about a judge that was refusing to hand over transcripts of trials. Yeah. No, every single...
This was a big grooming gang case, and he refused.
Somebody had offered to pay for the transcription of that trial.
Not conducive to the public good, I think. Us knowing what actually happened.
Let me tell you what is not conducive to the public good. Any single sense, an iota, even the mere whiff of a cover-up continuing into what has gone on. We have seen institutional, industrial scale gang rape of girls in this country. And I am afraid that I do not trust a single person in authority to be the arbiter of what can and cannot be made public. Yeah. Of course, the names of victims need to be kept anonymous, of course. But every single other piece of evidence needs to come to the fore, and we do need to know. And then once we have that evidence, yes, every single person in authority, someone who got a cushy public sector job, that's currently cashing out on a pension, that looked the other way, that covered up, that deliberately attempted to stop the investigations getting to the bottom of what was going on, they need to be hauled before the courts, and if they're convicted of covering this up, they need to be punished just as severely as the perpetrators themselves.
But this is the thing, I always wonder in these scenarios, we've talked about this so much on air over the years, just how do they sleep at night? How could you watch a 13-year-old going away to be raped by a group of men in their 40s and 50s for the umpteenth time while plied with drink and drugs, and just going to go home, I might order something, I might order a takeaway, I'll watch something on the telly and I'll go to sleep. How would you sleep at night knowing that was happening and it was something you could have stopped? It doesn't make... I can't compute it. And that's what, Maggie Oliver was someone who went, I can't stop this in my job as a police officer, so I'm going to have to leave to try and expose this. Because she was the one who was being punished by the senior police officials because she was speaking out and refusing to take no for an answer. Instead of the officers who went, yeah, you just carry on raping those girls. Let's all keep stum about it because, community cohesion. It doesn't make sense to me how anybody could do that, and yet we know Jimmy Savile I mean, I spoke to a nurse who worked in one of the hospitals where Jimmy Savile used to go in and sexually abuse children who were sick in hospital, and said, we were told to tell the kids, pretend to be asleep when Jimmy Savile comes round. I mean, this is so... It's so beyond comprehension, but this is still happening today.
Yeah, and Julia, this doesn't just happen in one place, in one town. This wasn't just a bunch of bad apples that got together and agreed to cover it up. This happened right across the length and breadth of this country. This happened in pretty much every single major town or city in Britain. It happened again and again, and it happened for decades. You ask how these officials were able to sleep at night. Some of them weren't even, it's happening today, don't even bother to go into the office. Yeah. These are people that are just there to cash in on a cheque, to look the other way, and to allow the most basic failures, not just of government, but of humanity, to occur on their watch.
It is still blowing in my mind. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's get in touch later before 4991000. Lots of texts coming in about the two-tier policing relating to the handling of the Southport riots after this report by MPs claims that there's no evidence, and in fact it's a disgrace. As we were told back in January by the Home Office, was an internal report saying, it was far right and extremist to even suggest there had been two-tier policing. I mean, obviously, we've all been blind and deaf all this last year. Barry's message to say, so in Southport, the police stood their ground to confront the mostly white crowd, then locked them up for social media posts, etc. But in Hare Hills, just a couple of weeks beforehand, they ran away from non-Indigenous crowds in fear of their lives. Explain the difference in attitude. Chris says, so why haven't there been mass arrests of the violence and destruction caused by the counter-protests and the riots? Paul says, sick government, yet another cover-up. Hopefully they don't get away with it this time. Yeah, they will. Down with Labour and a full audit on judicial and police and its leadership. Two-tier, 100%. Steve says the facts are available in abundance. Call a public inquiry, gather the witnesses and all the available evidence and shut this down once and for all. Martin says, translation, we investigated ourselves and found we did nothing wrong. Billy says, you can't lie your way out of something as obvious as the two-tier policing. Everyone can see it's painfully obvious. And Gary says, given the majority of the Home Affairs Select Committee is made up of Labour MPs, I'm not surprised. And Daniel says, yeah, sure, just like there are no lying MPs. Well, there we are. Just to remind you of some of that breaking news in the last hour, that former MP Craig Williams and a Welsh Conservative Senate member for Montgomeryshire, Russell George, former director of Conservative Party campaigning Anthony Lee, and his wife Laura Saunders have all been charged with betting offences in relation to last year's general election. You'll recall that basically word got out. It also, by the way, included a former police officer, Jeremy Hunt. No, not him. This is a police officer called Jeremy Hunt. All basically got wind that there was going to be a general election called much earlier than many expected. Went, according to the Gambling Commission, they believe they went down or placed bets online. They have now been charged with using that information to basically sort of insider trading something. Now, of course, these charges, they're due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court in June. Obviously, people are innocent until proven guilty. But this was quite a scandal in the election, wasn't it, Sam?
Yeah, and no doubt it's bad news for the Conservatives, who will not be wishing to relive this and now will have to go through a prolonged court case. Now, we should obviously say that many of them have denied wrongdoing, and there will be a court case, and I imagine much of it will come down to legal interpretation of the relevant rules ahead. But you can only think one of the members of this group that was charged, of course, is a serving Welsh Senedd member. So he's had the whip suspended this afternoon as a neutral act. This is going to be disastrous for the Conservatives, coming right at a time when they're trying to
local elections again. Timing's very interesting. The local elections a few weeks away. Just also the former minister for tackling corruption in the city, hilariously, Tulip Siddiq. She has said there is no evidence she's done anything wrong. This after Bangladesh issued an arrest warrant for her over allegations that she received a plot of land in the country's capital, Dhaka. Her aunt, of course, was a Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Her lawyers have said the allegations are completely false. No basis at all for any charges to be made against her, although, of course, she has lost her job as a government minister, although she is still my MP. So that's nice. We shall see how that worked out. Of course, she's very confused. She got a flat in London. Very confused about who gave her that as well. I mean, I don't know about you. Someone just gave me a flat. I would definitely be confused about who'd given me the flat. It's such an easy mistake to make. We've all done it. We've all done it. 12:34 is the time. Up next, lots more to come. We're going to be talking to Amy Gallagher from the New Culture Forum about, the latest trans issues hitting the news, not just Supreme Court, the Human Rights Commission, but also a mum who basically is banned from her daughter's primary school because she questioned what they were teaching their kids about trans ideology. That really happened in this country. Yeah, not 1984. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Let's talk about the latest woke madness. Let's talk about that with Amy Gallagher. She's a former NHS nurse, worked at the Tavistock Clinic. You've heard of that one. She's now a commentator at the New Culture Forum. Welcome back to the show, Amy.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Lots I want to get through with you. Can we just talk first of all, though, about an individual case? This involves a mum, Karina Conway. She's been told to stay away from her daughter's school, not allowed in the playground of her daughter's primary school, after she basically complained to the school that they were teaching kids a transgender identity was a protected characteristic when it's actually not. So she was right. The school, what they were doing was wrong. She perfectly reasonably made these points, and she's basically told, oh, you're not allowed to go and attend the school. Well, what's going on?
Yeah, she actually pointed out inaccuracies in the way that transgenderism was being taught in the school, and the school actually agreed with her, and they wrote a letter thanking her for highlighting how they were inaccurate. I mean, I don't think transgenderism or the Equality Act should be even being taught to 11-year-olds.
With you, I don't think it should be taught to anybody in schools, but there we are. I've raised this with my own daughter's school over the years.
Yeah, indeed, and she was protesting peacefully about this and making legitimate complaints, and she was told that she couldn't be near the playground. They actually accused her, not surprisingly, of being transphobic. I don't know what that word means anymore. And they even went as far as to accuse her of causing a non-binary child in the school to be targeted. There's obviously no such thing as a non-binary child. And I would argue that calling a child non-binary is what's causing them to be targeted, because it's putting a false label on them.
Absolutely.
Just complete madness. And this school, I should also say, were affirming some children's transgender identities, which completely goes against the Cass Review, which says that we shouldn't be socially transitioning.
This, by the way, has all happened, has it not, since the Cass Review, which said that, because the argument was always, well, you know, if you don't, you know, affirm, and if a little boy says he's a little girl, if you don't affirm that, the threat was from the clinics even, your kid will commit suicide. You must do this. You're hurting them if you don't. And the evidence from the Cass Review, actual evidence, because I know we like to do facts on this show, and so did the Cass Review, was that wasn't the case at all. It was quite the opposite.
Yeah, quite the opposite. Cass determines that actually you could be causing psychological harm by encouraging your child to transition or accept different identities, because it's psychologically stressful, and what if you change your mind, and it has all the social ramifications of that. So we're seeing now that schools are just, either they don't know about the Cass Review or they're just willfully ignoring it. But this ideology is still running rampant in private
Absolutely.
schools.
Well, it's running rampant in every institution. But one of the things I've noticed in schools is that they're under this this inclusion sort of directives. I mean, they're actually required by law to teach you inclusion and not discriminating against somebody because of their gender identity. But of course, as this mum pointed out, that's not the same as teaching them that it's a protected characteristic or promoting it. I mean, as opposed to this is something, hey, just because someone thinks they're non-binary or thinks they're born in the opposite sex, don't be nasty to them in the playground. Well, yeah, I mean, that should be kind of basic. Be kind. I think that people used to say, until we discovered the people who had that in their hashtag were actually the cruelest people on social media. Again, these ordinary people fighting these battles, are the people who are really taking the hit. And it is extraordinary how many schools are now, again, if you label someone as a bad person, transphobic, the other mums and dads don't want to talk to them. It's difficult for the child. People start shutting up. And again, the process is the punishment. Well, look, let's talk about what a lot of people are saying is a very hopeful thing that's happening this week. I'm not so sure about this, but we understand that under a new guidance, last amended in 2010, but new guidance from the Equality and Human Rights Commission. They're looking for a radical overhaul of equality laws to make sure that basically they protect women-only spaces and women-only rights. And they say that again and again, in public sectors, in private sector, in many bodies, that people are confusing sex and gender and people's gender identity with their biological sex and thinking that they have those protected rights when actually those rights are because of your biological sex, not what gender you think you are. But one of the things they're saying is they think that trans people who believe they are trans, should be routinely asked to present gender recognition certificates before they're able to use women-only spaces. But that means that any man could just get a gender recognition certificate and claim he's a woman and enter women's spaces, surely.
Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, this change in the guidance, potential change in the guidance, isn't a bad thing. It's quite good. I mean, when the Equality Act was initially drafted, it had the protected characteristics of gender reassignment surgery and biological sex. And what's happened over the years is that activists have conflated gender and sex. So they're arguing that, for example, a man who is transgender can enter into a woman's only space. And this new guidance will make it clear that those two things are separate. However, as you said, I mean, we'll have quite a significant ruling coming this Wednesday from the Supreme Court for the Women for Scotland case, which is going to rule whether biological sex means legal sex or biology.
This is the definition of what a woman is. It was very similar actually to Tickle v Giggle in Australia, isn't it? So you know that if you've got a gender recognition certificate that says you are legally, if you're a man, legally a woman, so your passport says you're a woman, you're changing your birth certificate to say you're a woman, all of these things, are you actually a woman? Now, anyone sane, anyone who understands knows that you don't actually become. If I could get a gender recognition certificate and I got this message I get on social media, oh, you look like a man. I mean, brilliant argument, well done. I mean, you've won that one, guys. But if I got a certificate saying I was a man, I could legally present as Julia Hartley-Brewer, my passport, birth certificate, or my driving licence. Wouldn't actually make me a man.
Yeah, I mean, obtaining a gender recognition certificate, all it means is that you have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and you've been living as the opposite sex for a couple of years.
Whatever that means.
Whatever that means. Yeah, that could just be having long hair if you're a man. I mean, it could mean anything.
I mean, how do I live as a woman? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know I go to work. I can put laundry on without asking for advice. Maybe that, I don't know.
Yeah, so I mean, if we'll have to see what the ruling is on Wednesday, but if they rule that, gender recognition certificate does mean that you can, in some instances, change your sex on certain documents, then it does mean that this new guidance in the Equality Act will be quite, it won't necessarily help matters, because a person could claim that, well, I have actually changed my sex under the law. So the conflation of gender and sex, it doesn't matter either way. So that's the issue. And as you say, gender, I mean, it's just a certificate. The idea that you can have a legal sex and a biological sex, to me, it's just madness.
Yeah. I mean, again, I was fairly understanding of the whole gender recognition certificate, years back, until you realise how outraged they've been exploited by the men who want to gain access to women's rights, women's safe spaces. Why do they want to enter our toilets and our changing rooms, or if they're convicted of a sex crime, enter our prisons? Oh, I can't imagine why. It's an utter mystery, isn't it, Amy? It really is. Just want to get you on, ask your thoughts on just one other story, though. This is not related to trans issues, but it's very much linked to a lot of the stories we've been talking about today in terms of the police. And we've seen two-tier policing of criminals, but we've also seen most outrageous different policies when it comes to recruitment of police officers, when it comes to priority being given for ethnic minority police officers in West Yorkshire Police and elsewhere. Very, very senior figures in senior policing basically saying they openly would like to be able to clearly discriminate to get more ethnic minority officers. But we're seeing this also in the NHS, of course, where you used to work in the NHS. NHS trusts have been prioritising black and ethnic minority applicants on interview shortlists in line, not against, in line with NHS England guidance. Tell us about this.
Yeah, I mean, this has actually been going on for a long time. I mean, I remember seeing job adverts like over 5 years ago where they would openly say, we strongly encourage and are keen to accept applications from BAME, black and ethnic minority candidates. So if you don't have the right skin colour, essentially you're sort of going into the interview feeling like, well, actually, you're not going to be that impressed with, I'm not what they're looking for. Now they've sort of ramped that up a little bit. They're actually putting it into guidance. And this guidance says that if there's two equally good candidates, one's black and one's BAME, black or ethnic minority, then if there's a tiebreaker, then you should pick the ethnic minority over the white person. Now, I don't see how that isn't illegal, basically. That is discrimination on the basis of race.
But also, when do you ever have two candidates who are identical?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to prove. So all of this stuff it kind of has an essence of illegality, and it's obviously racist, but they do it in a way that they can get away with it.
It's the right kind of racism, Amy. That's the thing. Positive discrimination is fine because you're righting some perceived wrongs of the past. But again, there are quite clear. I mean, look, of course, there's racism in Southern society, as there is in all ethnic groups and in all countries. But a lot of the differences in the ethnic disparity, same with the gender disparity in our country, is actually down to sort of demographics and lifestyle choices and career choices of people, and how long a particular ethnic group has been in large numbers in the country. Whether they're first, second, or third generation immigrants, and these things are always ignored. It must be racism, and therefore positive discrimination, which is racism of another kind, the opposite way, is justified.
Yeah, and what all of this stuff is going to do is it's going to cause resentment and division where there was none. I mean, as I said, I've worked in the NHS for a long time, and everybody really got along quite well, actually. It was an amazing example of kind of liberalism and multiculturalism gone right, actually. But when you're in the NHS and you see posters saying, for example, encouraging BAME people, black and ethnic minorities, into positions of leadership and giving them certain, seminars or lectures that aren't for other groups, aren't for white people notice it, and everybody, all races, feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, funny that. Yeah, exactly. But also, would you ever want to get a job because of that? The point of it was you want to stop people not getting a job because of that, but not the opposite way around. It's quite bizarre. Amy Gallagher, thank you so much. You've been a wonderful voice of reason, as you always are. Sam Armstrong, this stuff's happening. It's happening on a grand scale. I mean, but it's happened. It happened. I'm not having a go, but it happened under the Tory watch for years.
Yeah, sure did, and it's going to keep happening under this government, and it's probably going to happen under the government after that too, because people in power don't want to deal with it. But just to pick up on one point, I think you're absolutely right just to point out the fact that, when people on the other side of this argument turn around and they say, oh, well, there's a pay gap or there's a disparity, that is not, absolutely not, categorically not evidence of racism in this country. Never forget that certain ethnic groups do far, far better at every metric than white people. For example, people from an East Asian background are phenomenally successful in this country. Good, great, fantastic. And within people of the same racial background, for example, black West African people, black Caribbean people, outcomes are very different. The single biggest factor in any group are the choices people make, and people from certain backgrounds tend to make similar choices one of the key, more often than not.
It's socioeconomic background, but actually it's family.
If your dad is in the house,
you're going to do better.
Dads are the closest thing to a super fantastic boost for anyone growing up.
But you can't talk about that because that's also racist. Because if one group has a big disparity in terms of single mums, yeah, it is extraordinary. We are in such a bad state in this country, guys. We really... I feel like it's been quite a depressing show. Always amazing guests, quite a depressing show. Up next, we're going to talk about something that will definitely cheer you up. It turns out, I know, and you're going to be surprised, Simon, about this, but Ed Miliband, Net Zero Secretary, of course, is something of a carbon footprint hypocrite. And it turns out that his carbon footprint for all the flights he's been taking is 12 times higher than the average Briton. Shocking. We'll talk about that with Ross Clark up next. This is Talk.
Members of a grooming gang who preyed on teenage girls, they got £611,000 in legal aid. This is the Rotherham monsters, as they call them. This comes days after Labour went back on the abuse inquiry promises. Ringleader Mohammed Imran Ali Akhtar, 43, who was sentenced to 23 years in jail, got £143,000 in legal aid. His total doesn't include costs for a separate trial last year, where he got a 12-year term for raping a girl of 13 after plying her with booze and drugs.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Delighted to be joined now by Ross Clark. He's the author of numerous brilliant books, but in particular in relation to this topic, the author of Not Zero, How an Irrational Target Will Impoverish You, Help China and Won't Even Save the Planet. Very good afternoon to you, Ross.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I love this story. Net Zero Crusader Ed Miliband, it turns out, I know we're all shocked by this, has a carbon footprint 12 times higher than the average Briton because, of course, he takes so many flights in his job as Net Zero and Energy Security Secretary. He has racked up at least 44,600 air miles in the job just since last July. I mean, you'd think he was the Foreign Secretary or something, wouldn't you? Way more than the average Brit. But bearing in mind, this is a man who has called on Brits to fly less to save the planet. So what a surprise. Another green hypocrite.
Yeah, it's one rule for him, one rule for the rest of us, isn't it? I mean,
always is.
OK, say he had to fly to the COP29 climate summit in Baku.
I mean, rather him than us, eh? Rather him than us.
You could hold it. Why you can't hold it by Zoom, I don't know, because most of us have Zoom meetings all the time. But not only did he attend that summit, he also beforehand and sort of preparations, he flew to Brazil, he flew to New York, and he flew to Washington, all for sort of meetings leading up to that conference, which he could surely have held online. And in doing so, he's ratcheted up this 44,000 air miles. And if you sort of work that out, I even went on to a website called myclimate.org, which works out your carbon footprint for you if you say where you flew and what class you flew in. Assuming he flew business class, I mean,
which is worse for the planet.
he would certainly have flown business class. His flights alone would have emitted 12 times as much carbon dioxide as the average Briton
But
does in a
he,
year.
like the Sadiq Khans and others who were all signed up to this sort of cities, was it Cities 50, or there's some cities project, basically all signed up to this project, and they basically, and again, all the net zero advice from the Climate Change Committee, the government's official, supposedly laughably independent committee of advisors, most of whom, by the way, have no qualifications in this field whatsoever. I'm not sure a classics degree qualifies you to do this, but apparently it does if you're the chair of that committee. That basically they are saying that we're not going to hit the target, this is 2050 target, unless we limit people's use of cars, limit people's flights, limit people probably to realistically, one return, Europe flight a year. They actually openly talk about having that much control on us. But obviously all of these people assume, well, that will just be for us little people. They'll be able to carry on flying.
Yes, I'm sure they will be. There's actually a group called, or even worse than the Climate Change Committee, there's a group called UK FIRES, FIRES, which are a bunch of academics who are sort of advising the government on reaching this net zero target. And I mean, they published a report a few years ago quite openly calling for a dramatic contraction of the airline industry, saying there's no way that this industry could, is compatible with the 2050 net zero target. People will have to be discouraged from flying and stopped from flying. So I mean, that's where the sort of...
And we know that's what they want to do. We know that. They don't, again, I've said it quite a few times on the show, they say the quiet bit out loud. That is what is required. These are the same people, by the way, who don't like to mention the issue of net zero when it comes to things like saving our steelworks, or which bizarrely, we had, Ed Miliband among those people saying, yes, totally supporting saving the steelworks, when we know the reason why these steelworks at Scunthorpe needed to be saved was because the Chinese company that owned them couldn't make money on them because of our massively high energy costs, which are almost directly a result of net zero policies.
Yeah, we have the highest commercial electricity prices of any member country of the International Energy Agency. But it gets worse. I mean, the governments have spent the last 48 hours scrabbling around the world to find some coking coal to, keep these blast furnaces in Scunthorpe alight. And if they go cool, that's the end of them, basically. Yeah. But, if you listeners with longer memories may remember that there was going to be a coal mine in Cumbria, which was going to mine coking coal for the steel industry. And Ed Miliband, well, the previous government sort of pretty well failed to support it. But then it was Ed Miliband finally finished it off by failing to support it after the promoters lost a High Court case brought by environmental activists. And we've managed to miss out on this supply of local coking coal, which could have kept the Scunthorpe works.
Yeah, which actually, as my guest Sam Armstrong pointed out, we just import from the other side of the world instead.
We do, and one of Ed Miliband's reasons for sort of turning against this coal mine was he said, 85% of it would be exported. Well, what on earth is wrong with exports? We could do with a few more exports. Look at our balance of payments. Look at the, the world as it currently is with trade wars and so on.
It is utterly bizarre. I tell you what, though, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I don't think Ed Miliband's lasts another year in this government. He's going to be used as a scapegoat, but people always criticise Ed Miliband for a lot of these policies, but actually it was Tories for years, Labour, Lib Dems, they were all signed up to this, and Keir Starmer is completely signed up to this too, of course, unless you do the basic maths on this and you realise how insane it is. Ross Clark, great to talk to you, author of Not Zero. Thank you very much indeed. Just a quick word from Sam Armstrong on this. I mean, again, green hypocrites, what a surprise, like these Just Stop Oil protests. Go, save the planet, save the planet. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to leave this protest. I've now got to go on my half-term ski trip.
Look, but it's a great lifestyle.
Isn't it?
And you've got great career prospects when you finish. You finish up there, you're on the international scene, you get taken on by one of these companies that's making a fortune out of it. You can sit on a few boards.
A lot of travel.
You can retire well. Look, Julia, how about it? You and I give this all up, get into the green business, we'll make an awful lot more money. There is that,
or I can basically sort of say sorry, I can say I've got it all wrong, I now want to save the planet and I believe that this is the way to do it. I'll be on all the conferences, I'm travelling around. I wouldn't do them by Zoom. If you have a conference in the Bahamas, I'm turning up. Sam Armstrong, thank you very much for joining us for all of the stories. Now, if you didn't, he's some wonderful videos we put out on our social media, one involving what Sam had to say early on in this show about two-tier policing and the like. Do, please, do take a look at, and about Steele as well. I'd like to say Ian Collins joins us. How are you?
Well, I'm surprised I'm sitting here, actually.
I think we all are, because those HRs have mounted up, haven't they?
Well, they have a little bit. No, hear me out on this, OK? I was going to... Yesterday, you and I were having a friendly messaging each other as mates do.
My husband was